Good evening, dear listener. As you settle in for the night, make yourself comfortable and let your breath find a slow, steady rhythm. There is nothing you need to hold onto here. Whenever you're ready to drift off, we'll move together through quiet rooms of the past, listening to small, careful labors that kept whole communities at ease. The tone will be soft and unhurried, like a fire that glows without crackling. Tonight, let's quietly explore for gentle histories. We'll begin in an ancient Roman laundry workshop, where cloth was cleansed and finished without the soaps we know today. Then we'll walk the night, planks along China's Grand Canal, watching lock keepers tend water levels by lantern light. After that, we'll visit an Abbasid paper mill in Baghdad, where worn rags become smooth sheets ready for ink. And we'll end in a desert monastery, where water, bread, and ordered tasks carry a day from bell to bell if drowsiness comes. Allow it to arrive. The stories will continue their soft work while you rest, and you can rejoin them at any time. For now, close your eyes if you wish and let these quiet scenes unfold at a pace that suits your breathing. The workshop wakes before the street does. Its doors, thick and practical, still hold the night's cool. Inside, the Flemish feels like a little city of tubs and benches. The floors are stone, slightly sloped so water can find its way home, and along the walls stand wide-mouthed vessels sunk partly into the ground to keep their temperature steady. In the dim first light, the rims are pale hoops, waiting. Someone has already set a small lamp on a shelf near the doorway. The flame leans one way, then changes its mind, then decides to be still. The day begins with water. A boy carries it in careful trips, dipping from a cistern and pouring into the vessels until each shows a quiet, useful depth. The sound is soft and constant, the kind of sound that makes other sounds behave. A worker checks each vat with a stick marked at the handspan, looking for the right measure. On a peg, the stick's notches remember yesterday and make sure today will be the same shape. Bundles arrive from households across the neighborhood, tunics with dust at the hem, table linens with obedient creases, towels that smell of the public bath, and the occasional fine cloth folded inside a second cloth. The way a thought is wrapped in a whisper. Each bundle carries a small tag, a loop of fiber, or a spot of dye, some signal that will point the bundle back to its owner later. The foreman, gray around the temples and tidy around the eyes, makes a brief mark on a wax tablet to scratches for the treader's tubs, one for the rinsing channel, and a calm dot where pressing will come. This place has a rhythm that does not need calling out. Treaders step into the first tub, their hands steady on a wooden beam, and set their feet to work in a pattern that could be counted by a dozing cat. Heel, ball, lift, heel, ball, lift. The liquid in the tub is prepared the way the shop has always prepared it, aged, stirred, aired, sieved. The recipe is simple and exacting at once. It is not scented the way modern detergents are. Instead, it has the quiet sharpness of a tool that does its one purpose well. Fibers respond. Dirt loosens its polite hold. The treaders speak little, saving breath for the steady task of pressing and releasing, like an additional set of lungs for the garment. Nearby, a second line of vessels holds mixtures thickened with clay fullers, earthwork to a paste and smoothed with a paddle. A worker lifts a cloth from the first tub, squeezes it gently along the grain, and lowers it into this pale, velvety bath. Hands guide the paste through the weave with patient gestures, working along seams, and hands pressing where elbows and collars learn the habits of their wearers. The clay does not argue, it absorbs and carries away what he is asked to carry. Later, it will be rinsed from the fabric as if it had never been, leaving a memory only in the ease with which the cloth will take a fold. At the far side of the room runs a shallow channel of clear water, fed by a pipe that remembers the hillside. The water is not hurried. It moves like someone who knows there is time enough to arrive. Two workers stand there with wooden paddles and low baskets. They lift the cloth from the clay, lower it into the channel, and guide the rinse in long, even strokes so the weave does not twist. The water's voice here is different, a continuous thread that stitches the hours together. You can hear the city waking through the open top of the wall, a cartwheel making its careful announcement, a vendor deciding which fruit to place at the edge of a basket. Sandals making their first agreements with the day. A gentle aside, ancient workshops often practiced this kind of layered attention, one vessel for loosening, one for drawing out, one for clearing away. The steps were separate on purpose. So each could be learned without hurry. When each part is simple, the whole becomes simple too. Back near the doorway stands a closet of stone with a shuttered vent above it. It is empty now, but later will receive the finest cloth on racks for a final breath of warm sulfur, a drying that encourages brightness and discourages small life in the fibers. The closet is treated with the same matter-of-fact respect as the tubs. No fuss, just order. A worker runs a hand along the inner wall, checking for crumble or damp, then closes the door with a firm, habitual touch. Tools like to be touched the way they should be used. It helps them remember. Between stations, benches hold brushes, cords, and smooth wooden forms for finishing edges. A small pile of rounded pebbles waits to help with gentle scouring when a stain has decided it would rather stay. There is a press at the back to boards, and a screw that lowers with a sound like a heavy book closing. Cloth will rest there later under a steady weight, learning to be flat in the manner of a well-made thought. The foreman moves through the space at a pace that never changes. He listens for things the way a baker listens to dough or a potter to clay. A tub that sighs too quickly asks for a little more stirring. A bundle that looks shy of the right weight for its tag calls for a second counting. The wax tablet receives a new mark now and then, small as the movement of a sparrow's throat. Beside him, a young worker watches and learns how to glance without staring, how to hear without moving closer. In the corner, near the lamp, a woman sits with a needle and a basket of threads. She is not mending in the way a tailor mends, rather, she secures loose ends where they might unravel under the feet of the treaders. A loop at a seam, a wandering weft near a cuff, she smooths them back into the fabric sense of itself, so the washing helps rather than harms. Her work is quiet insurance, the kind that makes other work easier to be proud of. By now the light through the doorway has chosen a color and decided to keep it. The treaders step with the same patience. The channel whispers the same sentence. The clay keeps its listening. When a bundle's journey through loosen, draw, and clear is complete, the cloth is carried in two hands to a slanted board where water leaves by degrees. Another worker smooths it with the flat of a palm, coaxing folds to lie where they will lie again tomorrow. There is no shine yet, only readiness. If you like, you can sit on the little stool by the door. The stone is cool and the air smells like water meeting its tasks. The city beyond is beginning its list of errands, but in here the list is already underway. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is idle. The day's promise is not loud. It is a steady line from tub to tub, from bench to channel, from hand to cloth, and back to hand. By mid-morning, the workshop moves in an easy, practiced swell. The tubs have traded their first coolness for a steady warmth, and the channel's voice has settled into a single thread. From the rinsing bench a worker lifts a garment today, a pale tunic with a narrow woven border, and lets water fall from it in quiet beads. He lays it flat on a slanted board that keeps drips obedient, strokes the cloth with the flat of his palm, and aligns shoulder to shoulder the way one might align thoughts before speaking. The tunic has finished its walking in the treader's vat and its visit with the fuller's earth. Now it is ready for the comparts of the day, the steps that teach it to hold itself well. A second worker brings a smooth wooden rod, rounded at the edge like a river stone. With gentle passes he presses along the seams, asking them to remember their lines. He works outward, never tugging, simply encouraging the weave to lie as it was woven. A small brush of soft bristle lifts lint where it has collected. A stain at the hem, now only a suggestion, receives 3 light circles with a wet pebble and ceases to be an idea. In the back, the great press waits. It is built of to flat boards as broad as the dining table of a modest house, a screw rising from the center, and a handle worn by countless turns. At one side, thin sheets wove felt and smooth linen are stacked like courteous clouds. Between them, folded garments will rest and learn to be flat without becoming tired. The felt protects, the linen teaches smoothness. 2 workers lift the tunic together, carry it as if carrying cool water, and lay it on its cushion. Fold it in half, then again, then once more. It becomes a square with tidy edges. Another felt and linen sheet float down over it, a second garment takes its place on top, and so on until the stack reaches a certain respectful height. The screw turns with a sound like a grown tree in a thoughtful wind. The handle moves no faster than a patient breath. Weight descends, even and unambiguous. The stack accepts the lesson. A gentle aside, pressing is not only weight, it is time given shape. Weight without time is a shove, weight with time is memory. At the far wall, a worker checks the brightening closet. It is a chamber of stone with a grate set low and a vent high under shutter. It will be used sparingly and never without its little rituals. He runs a palm along the inner surface dry, and uncrumbled then sets 3 narrow racks within. A small brazier waits outside the door, the fuel for it is measured carefully, and there is a dish of clean sand for the ash when it has given what it should. The foreman comes, looks once, nods, and moves away. The closet will whiten a few fine pieces only, and only as long as is helpful. The aim is not glare, but quiet clarity. Meanwhile, other finishing tasks continue with soft persistence. Along a bench, 2 women with nimble needles secure loose threads that the walking tubs might have invited to wander. Their stitches are not decorative, only preventative, small, even, and so well-mannered they nearly vanish. Beside them a boy earns the shop's marks, copying each on a wax tablet, a tiny cross for the baker's household, a double slash for the bath steward, a small loop for the teacher on the corner. These marks will be chalked on an inner fold or tied on with a narrow strip of cloth, no larger than a fingernail. It is a quiet language, plain and sufficient, and it keeps tunics from getting lost among strangers. The press has had its hour. The handle turns in the other direction, with the soft groan of wood remembering itself. When the boards lift, a hush seems to follow, folded squares stacked, corners behaving. The felt and linen layers are set aside in a neat pile to air. The pressed garments are carried to a clean table. There, a woman with cool hands lifts the tunic from the middle of the stack and opens it with care. She smooths it once, lets it hang for a few breaths so that weight can gather its thoughts, and then folds it again, this time for delivery. Two fingers sharpen the crease at the shoulder as if drawing a line of ink. She tucks a thin sprig of dried rosemary at the edge, not as a perfume, but as a small promise of clean attention. For the finest pieces, the whitened linens of a careful household, the brightening closet receives its afternoon task. The stone door opens, 3 garments on their racks go inside. A worker kindles the brazier outside with a measured hand, then slides it under the grate. The vent shutter lifts to finger widths. The foreman watches the little flame with the same face he gives the ledger, alert and untroubled. After a short, counted time, no more than the recitation of an easy list, the brazier slides back out. The door is left closed while the closet settles. When the garments emerge, they are not proud, only clear shadows behave on their surfaces, and the folds look like decisions rather than accidents. A gentle aside, many workshops kept their own units of time, prayers, lists, the length of a familiar path in words, scent glasses, and sundials help. But the body also keeps good measure when it repeats a task every day. By the doorway, the delivery basket is lined with a clean cloth. The boy with the wax tablet stands beside it, matching mark to bundle, murmuring the names the marks mean, and placing the small chalk signs where they cannot be rubbed away by travel. He adds a sliver of red thread to the baker's package. The baker's wife prefers to see the sign twice, once for the eye and once for the fingers. The foreman makes his marks on another tablet, items, destinations, a little circle where there will be change due, a half circle where an egg or a small cake will be accepted instead of coin. The shop's mathematics are careful but friendly. In a corner sits the basin for hands. Each worker, on finishing a task, dips fingers, smooths them against a cloth, and only then reaches for the next garment. It is not a rule written on a wall. It is a habit that keeps fabric from learning any story that is not its own. The room feels cleaner for it in ways that are hard to count but easy to sense. Near midday the street grows companionable. A cart halts outside. A woman from 2 lanes over brings a loaf in a cloth as part payment, crust burnished, the mark of the baker's blade neat and confident. She waits with the patience of someone who understands the rhythm within. The foreman lifts her folded linens from the table, unfolds one at a corner for her eyes, and refolds it. She smiles with the brief upward press of lips that busy people use for gratitude. A small notch with the stylus notes the loaf against her account. The basket gains 2 more bundles, ready for the boy's delivery circuit, left at the corner, past the fountain, to the bath steward's door, and back through the alley where figs are set on trays to darken. Before the boy departs, an older worker wraps a narrow strap around the basket's middle and checks the knot twice. He lifts the straps across the boy's shoulders and adjusts them so weight will be a companion rather than a complaint. The boy's sandals are tied. His head sits well. He steps into the street with the measured gait of someone who carries other people's mornings and wishes to return them intact. Inside, the press rests with its screw-lifted boards relieved. The tubs are stirred for the next round. The channel continues its sentence. A brief breeze finds the doorway and brings in the smell of cooked grain from somewhere, and the faintest sweetness of figs. The Phallonica acknowledges the sense, but keeps its own linen, water, clay, the wooden heart of the press, and a method that never hurries. By the lamp, the needlewoman secures one last wander of thread on a cuff and bites off the end with small, neat teeth. She smooths the cloth as one might smooth the hair of a patient child. The foreman closes his tablet, scratches a last mark that means on course, and places the stylus in its groove. The day is exactly where it ought to be, in the middle, balanced, steady. The boy steps into late morning with the basket strap set just so. The street greets him with a brightness that knows how to mind its business. Stones fit to one another like careful neighbors. Gaps hold yesterday's dust in modest amounts. Here and there large stepping blocks cross the roadway so feet and wheels can share. The basket rides against his back, its weight honest and not unfriendly. He keeps to the shade where it lies, then accepts the sun for a few paces, then shade again the same way the Phallonica alternates between water and press, loosen and settle. The first stop is the baker's corner. His doorway is deep, the lintel seasoned by heat, and the smell is the kind that speaks in round words: loaf, crust, crumb. The baker's wife appears with flour on her forearms like pale bracelets. The boy rests the basket on a low bench, unties the strap's knot, and lifts out the familiar stack. The mark for this household, a tiny cross made with two chalk lines, shows at the fold's edge. He opens the top cloth just enough to show the seam's calm line, and the shoulder's obedient crease. She nods without ceremony, places the bundle on a shelf where it will cool from its pressing the way bread cools from the oven, and with her neat nail scratches a line on the tablet that lives beside the till. Payment today is not coin but to round loaves with the bakery's stamp, passed over like a small favor, asked and granted. The boy slips them into the side of the basket and readies the strap. A gentle aside, in many quarters, accounts were comfortable mixtures, some coin as a spine with food, oil, or small services as ribs. The ledger learned to speak more than one language of value. Down the lane, figs darken on woven trays. A woman shoes a curious dog without looking up. A water carrier sings a line of a tune and lets it end where it wishes. The boy keeps his steps even and lifts the basket strap higher on his shoulder when the street tilts. At the public fountain, he pauses to wet the back of his neck with two fingers and watches water spill from a spout shaped like a calm face. Someone has left a sprig of greenery in the basin, a quiet offering to utility. The bath steward's doorway sits opposite the fountain, shaded by cloth hung like a waiting thought. He has many towels, all with the double slash mark. The boy's knuckles tap the door in the rhythm expected here. A hand appears, rings shining with the damp of steam. The towels exchange places, clean for used like sailors crossing a gangplank. The steward hands back a small jar of oil as part of the tally, its cork tied with string. A note is added to the boy's wax tablet with the stylus he carries tucked in the strap. 2 dots for oil, a small circle for from store. So the foreman at day's end will match jars to entries as neatly as garments to marks. The teacher's threshold is next. A narrow room opening to a wider one, a board on trestles, and low stools with the day's handwriting already waiting under fingernails. The teacher appreciates a fold that behaves when lifted before a dozen pairs of eyes. The boy lays the bundle on the clean part of the table. The teacher lifts a corner, breathes the simple scent of fiber and water, and presses the corner back. Payment will come on the market day, for now the teacher gives a nod. And a student solemn about this errand presses a crumb of wax into the boy's tablet to mark the promise. At a domus farther along, the threshold is higher, the entry floor mosaicked with a design meant to slow footsteps, just enough to be noticed. A servant receives the bundle. Her glance is careful, but friendly. She has her own tasks that require such glances. She points to a small chipping at the edge of a tunic seam. The boy makes a note with his stylus, a little arrow, so the needlewoman will secure it when the garment returns for its next washing. The servant places a dried sprig, this one of bay, on the finished stack, a household habit, and passes over a small leather token, a tally piece to redeem later in coin. The boy drops it into the pouch tied at his belt. Back through the smaller lanes, where awnings give shade the color of ripe olives, he turns into a courtyard of an insula where laundry lines look like notes on a staff. Children play a game with pebbles, counting in whispers. Here the mark is a red thread loop with a knot, easy to feel without unfolding. The woman who takes the bundle wipes her hands first on her apron out of respect for the clean. She asks after the Pholonika's needlewoman. Last time she secured a fray at the elbow that had been trying to make trouble for weeks. The boy answers that all is well and receives, with a small smile, an egg wrapped in straw. He tucks it carefully into the basket's pocket where the loaves keep it from bumping. A gentle aside. Thresholds teach a city how to speak to itself. A nod, a token, a sprig, a line on wax, the quiet grammar of errands. He continues, passing a stall where a cobbler's awl taps its diligent punctuation into leather soles. A man with a tray of small clay lamps he casts himself tilts one to show its smoothness. The boy admires and moves on. At a corner, a woman with jars of vinegar under a cloth awning looks up, and the boy remembers a parcel for her to folded cloths with the small loop mark. He places them on a plank, and she uncovers a jug to release its tidy scent. She dips a reed into the liquid and draws a drop on the plank. It leaves a clear path and dries without stickiness. Good vinegar. She nods, then adds a small stopper to the jug, moves a counting bead on a string over the stall, and the boy makes another dot on his tablet. He finishes the circuit by the noon hour. The last stop is at a small room near the market where a widow sits with a basket of spinning. Her mark is a single short line, as plain as the doorway. She pays with coin today to small ones warmed by her palm. She puts a finger to the tunic's crease and smiles in a way that smooths the air. The boy returns the smile in quiet, lifts the strap over his shoulder again, and heads back along the sheeted side of the lane. Inside the Pholonica, the rhythm has not faltered. The press is resting between rounds. The channel continues its one long sentence. In the brightening closet, 3 garments finish their small transformation. The foreman receives the boy's tablet and pouch. He reads the lines and dots with the quick attention of someone who has read many such pages. The tokens pass to a little bowl. The oil jar goes to the shelf with its mates. The loaves rest on a board near the corner where workers will break them with cheese at the day's pause. He adds his neat mark at the bottom of the boy's wax, a tiny upright stroke that means account returned and speaking sense. The boy takes a cup of water by the basin, presses its coolness to his temple, and sets the basket on its hook to rest. Outside, the street continues its ordinary conversation will, foot, voice, but inside, cloth keeps learning how to be itself again and again. The tunics he delivered are already beginning their next lives. On a shoulder in a classroom, On a back at the oven, folded on a shelf where afternoon light will lie for a while and then move away. Afternoon enters without announcement, only by the change in light along the wall and the way feet prefer the shaded stones. The workshop keeps its even tempo. The press has finished a second lesson for the garments beneath it. The channel writes its clear line without needing to think about each word. A small breeze discovers the doorway and decides to stay. At the mending bench, the needlewoman draws a stool close and sets a shallow basket at her feet. Inside are tidy coils of thread and dyed wool, linen in pale shades, and a few darker lengths for seams that prefer to remain modest. She chooses a fine needle and warms it briefly between her fingers, the way another craft might warm wax. The tunic with the servant's tiny complaint lies open to the light. She turns the edge and finds where the weave has loosened its handshake. With small, regular bites she takes the wandering thread back into company, smooths the line with her thumb, and tests it with a gentle tug. The whole repair uses less thread than a grass blade would envy and disappears, as though it had always belonged. Beside her, a young worker sorts garments by their next task, those bound for the press, those ready for hanging, those for a brief visit to the brightening closet. He reads the chalk marks and little ties without sounding them out, returning each piece to its quiet cue. A brush waits on the bench, its bristles trimmed so they do not scold the cloth. Where lint has gathered, the brush tells it to be on its way. At the closet, the worker assigned to brightening reviews the steps with the kind of attention a door deserves at night. The stone chamber is cool, its racks are set at a height that respects hands and backs. He checks the upper vent. The small shutter moves on its pin without argument. He looks to the brazier's dish, and the bowl of sand waiting beside it. Fuel is measured no more than a mound that would fill a cup palm twice. The foreman comes to the threshold, watches the setting the way a scribe watches the first line on a new sheet, and nods. The rack receives 3 fine linens, spaced like notes with the needed silence between them. The door closes, the brazier slides into its place, the vent opens a finger's width. The worker sits on the low stool nearby and counts, by a list kept in the shop's memory, rims of tub 6, brushes 3, cords 2, brightening 1 short song. When the last word is reached, the brazier slides back, the door remains closed, not to trap anything, but to let the chamber do its small thinking in peace. A few breaths later, the linens emerge with a gentle clarity, not theatrical, just firm about being clean. A gentle aside, the workshop treats strong things as if they were delicate, and delicate things as if they were strong. The result is steadiness. Across the room, the treaders take a pause. They sit on the low bench that runs along a wall and ease their feet from sandals. The soles show the city's calendar, faint outlines of stones and seasons written in smoothness and rough. A basin waits. The youngest fills it with water from the channel. The foreman adds a spoon of vinegar from a small jug, and each pair of feet receives a slow rinse. Someone passes a strip of cloth and a pinch of oil. The treaders do not brag about their work. The basin understands anyway. Near the door, a table holds the day's small meal, a board with the baker's to loaves, a round of cheese with a rind that keeps secrets, a dish of olives, and a handful of figs the boy bought with one of the bath steward's coins at a fair price. No feast, just a pause with enough kindness in it to quiet hunger without inviting sleep. The foreman's stylus rests on the edge of his tablet while he breaks bread. He eats in the same way he writes, measured, neat, finishing what he begins. When the meal has made its usefulness known, the room resumes its positions. The tubs are stirred. A worker lifts a reed basket from the fuller's clay vat and carries it to a low shelf. There, with the care used in a kitchen, he spreads the clay thinly on a tile to dry for reuse. Too much of it will be spent, the shop knows, by color and by the way it resists the paddle, but some will serve again after a rest and a sifting. A sieve waits for this purpose, its mesh fine as a quiet voice. Spent clay, too tired to help, goes into a lion pit beside the wall. Later it will be carried away to fill ruts in a path that no longer argues with wheels. At the channel, a worker clears the small grate that keeps stray threads from traveling where they shouldn't. He lays the threads to dry on the sill. Sometimes they become ties for marks. Sometimes they simply become a small bird's idea of comfort. He runs the paddle along the water once, not to change it but to remind it that the shop is paying attention. The foreman revisits the ledger. The wax tablet has earned a rest, so he opens the wooden-bound book that keeps longer memory. The script inside is practical letters that stand up straight without ornament. He records what the morning recorded about itself: bundles and cloths out, oil and loaves received, one token to coins, one promissory mark, one egg. He adds an entry for thread spent and clay to be sifted. A small triangle indicates note for tomorrow. Check the press cord, which made a sound like a question. He turns the page with hands that do not rush paper any more than they rush cloth. A gentle aside, shops often gave their tools a line in the ledger, not for sentiment but for continuity. A press that asked for a cord today will repay in comfolds tomorrow. On the far wall, garments that do not need pressing hang from smooth poles. Drips fall with courteous intervals into a shallow trough, then into a pot kept for the purpose. The water will not go to waste. Tomorrow it will be used to wet the floor before sweeping, so dust keeps its thoughts to itself. A worker visits each hanging piece, pinches a corner lightly to check, and straightens a fold where gravity has improvised. He moves slowly enough that the air can pass around him without noticing he was there. The mending bench concludes its work for the hour. The needlewoman sets her needle upright in a pink cushion and wins the unused thread back on its little card, not because thread is rare today, but because carefulness keeps its own company. She places a small scrap of parchment into the tunic's fold, a note to the household: "Seam secured, wash kindly." No lesson. Only a reminder that cloth has a memory and prefers gentle teachers. In a corner, a pair of wooden forms rests under two pieces of cloth, shoulders shaped by long use. A worker slips the damp tunic over one form and smooths it as if greeting a friend who has returned from a long errand. Forms are not necessary for every garment, but when used, they lend a quiet confidence to the shoulder and neckline that even a hurried eye will sense. The afternoon lengthens, but not enough to weigh on anyone. A bird lands briefly in the doorway and decides the inside is too industrious for its taste. The boy returns from a short errand with a small sack of chalk sticks, each wrapped in paper, and places them in a box with partitions. He writes the date on the lid. He then fills the oil lamp that attends the mending bench and trims its wick, because lamps appreciate being readied well before they are asked to speak. The brightening worker folds a cloth over the brazier's dish and stores it under the bench, the bowl of sand back at its post. He runs a finger along the closet's stone edge, cool, quiet. He closes the vent until it rests neat and aligned with its frame. All the while, the channel keeps its line, the tubs their soft vowels, the press its consonant less speech than breath. Toward evening, the light moves across the wall like a careful hand smoothing a sheet. The workshop's voice lowers of its own accord. The treaders lift their feet from the tubs and rest their hands along the beam, not in fatigue but in recognition that the day has said what it intended to say. One by one, the wooden paddles lean against their pegs, the brushes return to their place with bristles upward, like attentive grass after rain. Closing begins with water. A worker opens the small stop at the base of a tub. The liquid leaves in a slow ribbon that remembers its duties are finished. He rinses the vessel with 2 clean bucketfuls, sending the second rinse down the same path, and runs a palm around the rim to find anything the eye may have missed. The tub answers in a language of coolness and smoothness. Nearby, the clay that receives its own simple blessing. A paddle slides along the sides, gathering what can serve again. A sieve receives it. A cloth-covered jar keeps it until morning. The remainder, no longer ready to help, is led to the lined pit by the wall. It will have a second life in a rotted lane. The channel's grate is lifted and cleared, threads and lint laid out to dry for ties. A worker raises the end stone, lets fresh water run for a time to rinse the bed, then lowers the stone again. He draws a fingertip along the channel floor. It squeaks faintly, a small, honest sound. He smiles at the squeak the way one smiles at a child repeating a well-learned line. Floors enjoy being washed when the day is done. A bucket of the saved drip water is poured and pushed along with a squeegee board. The damp gathers the dust into a polite company, and the slope the builders gave the floor sends it upward. Another worker follows with a cloth around a broom, coaxing the last beads to the doorway. The stone feels satisfied underfoot, like a page that has been read and returned to its place. At the mending bench, the needlewoman ties a final knot as small as a secret and smooths it flat with the pad of a finger. She slides her needle into the pink cushion, wins the remaining thread back on its card, and lays the card in the little box that counts such thrift. She writes a 2-word note on a sliver of parchment hem, watch 10, tucks it into the fold of a garment whose edge had opinions. Her stool returns to its mark on the floor, aligned with a stuff that remembers it. The press receives a courtesy. The screw is turned the last quarter, and then eased upward, so wood can sleep without a weight on its thought. A rag with a breath of oil visits the screw's threads, a gesture that repays many mornings. The felt layers, aired on a line while the room was busy, come back to their neat stack. Linen interleaves are counted and squared, edges matching as if they had practiced. A gentle aside, closing rituals are not ceremony for their own sake. They are letters to tomorrow that say, "You will not be surprised." At the brightening closet, the worker runs a hand over the stone door and checks the vent's shutter. The brazier dish is empty, cool, and clean. A small pinch of sand is brushed back into the bowl so the surface sits level, pleasing to the eye. The racks within stand bare and straight. He leaves the door slightly ajar. The closet prefers to breathe like anything that has done careful work. The foreman opens the wooden book for its last page today. He reads the marks the day made. Bundles in and out, loaves traded, a jar of oil to coins, 1 token, an egg successfully carried, chalk acquired, wick trimmed, clay set aside, cord to be checked. He enters the totals as columns that lean gently toward one another. He adds a small square beside the chord's note, tomorrow. Before the first pressing, the chord will speak and be heard. Wages are simple and punctual. From a cloth bag the foreman counts coins into small palm-up hands, enough to say we keep faith, not so much as to teach forgetfulness. For the boy a half-coin and a fig from the board, for the treaders, coins and a fair measure of oil to mind their feet, for the needlewoman, coin and a narrow length of good linen to replenish her box. Each worker passes by the basin, rinses hands, and dries them on the same folded cloth that has stood near it all day, now ready for laundry in its turn. There is no speech about gratitude. The ledger and the hands have already said enough. The last bundles destined for morning delivery are stacked into lines on a clean shelf near the door. Each bears its small mark at an inner fold, facing up like a quiet address. A sprig of rosemary lies in the corner of the shelf, not as garnish but as a reminder that plants keep company with cloth in useful ways. The boy checks the basket's strap, smooths its weave where it has learned his shoulder, and hangs it on its peg so it will not dream of slipping. Tools want to be touched before dark. The paddles receive a brief stroke. The brushes have their bristles combed with fingers. The beam above the treader's tubs gets a cloth run along it to catch the day's fine salt. The lamp by the mending benches snuff with the lid that always snuffs it no breath. So Soot chooses somewhere else to live. Outside, the street takes on evening's patience. Voices lower, a cart's iron ring hums a little longer against a stone, bread cools under cloth on windowsills. A bird tells the same short story 3 times and is finished. In the doorway, the last light of the day reminds the foreman of something that is not a task, only the comfort of seeing a room that knows how to be itself. He slides the bolt to its keep, a wood-on would sound like a polite cough, and tests it once. Not to mistrust, only to be on speaking terms with closure. He turns to the room and lets his eye pass over everything. Tubs empty, press eased, closet quiet, floors damp and honest rectangles, where the cloth passed, ledger closed and bound with its cord crossed twice. He nods, though no one is there to see, and the nod belongs to the room as much as to him. A gentle aside, many places sleep better when someone says good night to them, even if it is only with a look. The foreman steps out. The door draws to behind him. Evening air has the cool of stone in it, and a thread of baking that has not yet finished telling its story. He walks home at the pace the day taught and hurried, regular, carrying nothing but what his hands know. In a few houses, the bundles he sent out this afternoon are opened, fingers meet cloth that lies calmly, hands remember the lines they were taught, shoulders find themselves in familiar places. The city wears its clean linen without boasting, as it wears its streets and its sleep. If your breath wishes, let it match the room's now quiet rhythm. Rinse, fold, close, count, nod, rest. The Philonico will wait through the night without impatience, and morning will unlock it into usefulness again. And as we leave the workshop's cool stones to their sleep, let's step into night air by the great waterway, where lantern-light touches wet wood, and lock-keepers listen for the gentle questions of a river. Evening draws a long, even line along the water. The canal surface, flat as a held breath, keeps the day's last color for a few quiet minutes, then lets it go. On the lock's timber platform, a lantern is set upon its iron hook. The keeper lifts the cap, trims the wick with tidy scissors, and steadies the flame with his hand until it stands small and sure. The light does not shout. It simply makes room for the eye to work. The lock is a practical arrangement of wood and stone, built to talk with water in short sentences. Two gates, the lower pair that know the downstream level, and the upper pair that know the higher, hold a chamber between them. In the sill of each gate sit small shuttered mouths that can be opened a little or a little more, teaching the water to move with manners. A beam across the top carries hooks for lines and places for the long poles that live their lives between shoulder and current. The stones underfoot remember many feet and have learned to accept the weight without comment. Inside a low hut by the platform, rice has finished steaming. A clay pot of tea waits beside the brazier. Its lid clicks softly now and then as heat finds places to rest. The keeper's wife lays out bowls plain, well-cured earthenware with rims that fit the hand and a small dish of pickled greens that wake the tongue without crowding it. A thin, steady rain began an hour ago and decided to continue. It writes a constant, even script on the roof and the canal. The smell of wet bamboo from the bank reaches inside, and the floor welcomes it. Before the meal, the keeper walks the path along the upper gate. He touches each upright with the back of his fingers, the way a carpenter greets a frame. Moisture beads where it should, the joints keep their counsel. He leans into the beam, tests the hinge pin with the slow strength of the shoulder, and listens for any letter of complaint. The pin answers with silence, which is the language of hinges that have been oiled in time. At the sluice shutter he kneels, lifts and lowers it by a hand's breadth, and sets the pin back in its notch. The water stirs politely and then smooths itself again. A gentle aside, centuries before, engineers along this very waterway refined the pound lock, a simple idea made deep by careful practice so boats might rise and fall safely between levels without rush. To gates, the chamber, patient vows, and people who listen more than they speak. At the hut's doorway hangs a bamboo rain cape and a hat shaped like an uncomplicated bell. The apprentice, younger by 2 decades and strong in the useful way of someone who knows how to pace himself, lifts them down and lays them across a stool to dry from their last errand. He checks the boat pole tips where they have been bound with iron, rubs them with a cloth dipped in a little oil, and slides the poles back into their hooks. He folds 2 coils of rope, palm to palm, then sets them at the edge of the platform where hands will find them without looking. They eat. The rice is not in a hurry. The tea is poured in low bowls that keep the hands warm, but not too warm. A paper screen rattles evenly under the rain, and the sound is comfortable enough to keep them company. The keeper's wife sets aside a portion for the late boatmen who will arrive, wet and patient, with their cargo and their own stories of the day's banks. A cloth, used only at this hour, covers the rice pot. Its weave remembers steam and always returns the favor. When the bowls are rinsed and turned upside down to dry, the keeper opens the ledger. Its pages carry columns drawn by a careful read, the date in one line, the hour in another, then boat names like short poems, cargo marks simply grain, salt, timber, jars, and notations of direction. Beside the book rests a brush wrapped in cloth, a stone for ink, and a small sand-filled dish to dry characters that prefer not to smudge. The apprentice recites the simple rules that must be recited on first watch, not for the foreman but for the habit: lanterns trimmed, gates inspected, ropes coiled, signal gongs ready, toll weights in their drawer, seal box in sight. His voice is low enough to share space with the rain, At the platform's corner hangs a pair of small gongs with different voices. The left gong says approach with ease, the right says wait at distance. Both together mean chamber and use. Tonight the left one glints more brightly. The apprentice wipes the right with a dry cloth so it will speak cleanly when asked. He tests them with taps that stay small enough not to travel beyond the near bank. The sound carries across the chamber anyway. Water knows how to hold a note. Downstream, a lamp brightens and dims at regular intervals. A grain boat announces itself with this careful language. The keeper answers by lifting the left gong once, steady and clear, then points the lantern toward the safe mooring post below the lower gate. The boatman understands. His boat turns a little into the faint current, comes even with the post, and kisses it without haste. A line loops around the post. With a quick figure 8, the boat breathes out. In the rain, that breath looks like a gentler part of the same weather. Before the gate work begins, there is the common exchange of courtesies and checks. The boatman offers his travel board, a small piece of wood with characters brushed on that identify cargo and route. The keeper holds it under the lantern's rim and reads, not suspiciously, simply so that the day will remember itself correctly on paper. He touches the seal mark in the corner. Its wax is firm and slightly scented, the way some seals are when the keeper takes quiet pride in his box. The toll weights sit in their drawer. Tonight's transaction will be recorded later, once the boat is through and the lock has finished thinking its thoughts. The apprentice steps to the lower gate with his pole. He sets the tip against the timber, his shoulder under the beam, and waits for the keeper's small nod. The nod arrives. The pole moves, the hinge answers, and the gate turns a little at first, then more confidently as the water's difference begins to speak. The apprentice knows the point where motion owns itself, and then slows to listen again. He stops there, sets a wedge to keep the gate from gossiping wider, and watches the surface settle. The boatman looks only when he needs to look. The rest of his glance belongs to the line in his hand, the small creaks of his planks, and the rain that tells him it is time to be attentive, not heroic. A gentle aside, many water tasks are learned by shoulder and ear. Books can teach names, practice teaches when to stop before success turns into disturbance. The chamber receives the boat like a room that has already swept. Ropes pass from hand to hand, the boat touches the timber fender, then rests. The keeper lifts the shutter pin on the upper sluice by the width of a beam, no more. The sound that follows is not a rush but a polite murmur that grows, thread by thread. Water rises along the chamber's stone with the patience of someone counting to 50 before answering. The apprentice holds his pole across the boat's beam as a guard against drift, but the line's quiet firmness does most of the work. The boatman breathes in the smell of wet rope and tea, and his shoulders slant into comfort. From the hut, the keeper's wife brings a ladle and offers warm water into the boatman's bowl. He nods, letting steam visit his face. She leaves a small dish of salted radish on the platform's edge for anyone whose mouth would lack company. No one speaks more than they need to. The rain, the sluice, and the lantern are doing the storytelling. The water inside the chamber nears the upper level. The keeper, who has been watching a notch on the stone that knows both heights, lowers the shutter by a finger's breadth to discourage hurry. He looks to the apprentice, then to the boatman, then to the gate pin. All three nods are small and in agreement. The keeper rests 2 fingers on the shutter's pin and listens the way one listens to a kettle near its first whisper. The water inside the chamber has crept to the notch he trusts. He eases the shutter down another small step. The murmur softens, then makes a rounder sound that means enough. The apprentice adjusts his pull so its weight is in the heel of his palm rather than the wrist. Small kindnesses keep hands willing through long hours. Ready, the keeper says, a word that leaves no echo. He points the lantern toward the upper gate's hinge. The apprentice moves shoulder under the beam, pole tip sure against the timber. The gate considers, then yields by inches, not out of reluctance, only because water prefers conversation to command. A wedge slips into place to hold the half-open piece. The boatman draws his line in slightly, keeping a gentle slant from post to bow, and the boat rests in that geometry like a content thought. A gentle aside. A gate is heavy but not stubborn if you ask it with the right part of your body. Shoulders speak better gate language than hands. The chamber's level and the reach beyond it agree. The keeper nods small twice and the apprentice opens the gate a finger width more. Space appears, water neither rushing in nor out, simply finding continuity. Come, the keeper says, a courtesy to motion. The boatman leans his weight into the pole at the bow, pushes once, and then the boat is its own engine, sliding through the cleared mouth with the ease of a word well placed in a sentence. The apprentice walks alongside on the platform, pole across, ready to discourage any curiosity the current might show. He needs to do nothing. The boat minds itself. Beyond the gate, the upper reach lies smooth under the rain. The lantern's circle of light entangles a little shine on the water where the boat's bow parts it. The keeper gives the left gong a small tap that says channel clear, and in the distance another answering light acknowledges with the same quiet grammar. The boatman settles his stern line, sets the pole to its rest, and lets the boat come even with the waiting post. For a moment all is simply verticals. Post, pole, rain, plumb lines drawn by a patient evening. At the platform's table, under the hot sieve where the rain writes its steady characters on the edge of the roof, the keeper and boatman unfold the small square of cloth that keeps papers dry. The travel board rests on it. The keeper sets his seal box beside. From the drawer he brings out the toll weights, small stones, and metal bits that know their stations in the scales pans. The apprentice wipes the beam balance with a dry cloth, not because the rain has touched it, but because dust sometimes travels with company. The cargo is grain, recorded earlier on the board in a hand that likes straight lines. The measure is standard for this section, so many baskets, counted at the last depot, sealed and noted. The keeper confirms the seals by touch as much as sight, then sets the appropriate weights in the scale. He adds a sliver, then removes it, until the beam rests in its calm middle. The toll is not a surprise. The boatman has set aside the small string of coins that will answer it. They clink with the soft, clothed sound that coins make when they understand their purpose. The keeper places them in the drawer, moves a counting bead along its wire, and lifts the brush. The ledger's paper is a kind that forgives damp evenings. The keeper rubs the ink stick on its stone, turning it in circles that never hurry. The brush drinks and grows ready. Characters bloom with modest strokes. Date, R, boat name and mark, direction, cargo, toll received. A small square for weather gets a dot tonight. The dot means steady rain. In the margin he draws a brief line that looks like a gate half open. The apprentice passes the sand dish across, The keeper lifts a pinch and lets it fall. After a moment he blows once, not to rush, only to encourage dryness. The page accepts the seal stamp with a soft round bloom of vermilion, as if the night itself signed the passage. A gentle aside, books that live by water learn to breathe with weather, their keepers too. The keeper's wife appears with the ladle again, offers the boatman a second bowl of hot water, and sets a pinch of tea leaves to wake in it. He inclines his head, holds the bowl with both hands, and drinks as if he has remembered something simple and important. He passes the bowl back with 2 fingers on the rim, a courtesy that keeps hands from bumping in the narrow space. Another lamp moves downstream, this one slower, with pauses that mark the pilings. The apprentice watches its rhythm and names it softly. Timber raft, stitched trunks moving as one. Rafts make special use of the lochwider, lower, patient. The keeper answers with the right gong, wait at distance. He raises his lantern so the raft captain will see the reason the chamber still composing itself, the gate settling from its last turn, waits and brush not yet put to sleep. The raft's lamp slows, then steadies in a waiting place by the bank, its reflections looking like small fish caught in polite indecision. Back at the upper gate, the apprentice closes to the wedge, eases it out with a tap from his palm, and draws the gate in. It moves with the satisfied sound of wood fitting wood. He sets the pin home and listens for that slight seated note. The keeper lowers the upper shutter of breadth to quiet the reach, then calls over his shoulder, down. The apprentice crosses the platform to the lower side, where the boat entered minutes ago. He opens the sluice there just a bean's width again, and the chamber begins to compose a descent, the reverse of what it did a short time earlier. Water rights itself into the lower reach with as much courtesy as it rose. The raft captain climbs onto the bank, carrying his travel board wrapped in oilcloth. He waits without fidgeting beneath the eave. The rain beads on the brim of his hat and falls in a soft line. When the keeper nods, they step to the board and unfold the cloth. The raft's cargo is not counted in baskets. It is recorded in lengths and thicknesses, its sections tied by ropes that remember whose knots they trust. The keeper will bring the raft through in 2 parts if the chamber prefers that tonight. He runs his palm along the edge of the oilcloth, feels that it has done its job, and lays his seal box ready. The apprentice checks the chamber's stones by a lamp like the wet mark that climbs and settles, the fenders that keep boats and rafts from making acquaintances too close for comfort. He tests the mooring posts with his heel. They answer the steady language of sunk timbers that have learned a long patience. He glances at the sky out of habit. Rain has settled to a finer writing, and there is a brighter gray behind the clouds that means the night will be even-tempered. The chamber is ready to receive again. The keeper taps the left gong once, then twice with a small pause, the signal that means wide load, come slow. The raft answers by inching forward, its lashings dark and neat, the trunks wearing a shine the rain has given them. The apprentice takes a longer pole from its hooks, the one with an extra iron band at the tip, and stands in the place where he can guide the raft's shoulder rather than its face. He speaks to it in the language poles and rafts understand, a nudge, a brace, a patience that travels through wood better than through words. A gentle aside, night shifts do not seek variety, but they accept it. Boats, rafts, weather, and ours share the loch if everyone agrees to be ordinary together. The keeper's wife sets a fresh stick of charcoal on the brazier. then puts the lid back on the rice pot to keep its warmth from wandering. She straightens the towel that lies folded for cold hands and adds one more bowl to the row of bowls because the raft crews are often more than one pair of hands. The raft's first section finds the chamber, makes its slow courtesy to the fender, and rests. The keeper raises the upper shutter by its beam width and watches the water climb with the self-control he has taught it. The apprentice stands with his pole across the timbers, easy but present. The raft captain lets out a single short hum, a habit of some men when the night suits them and the sound settles into the rain without changing it. When the raft section reaches level, they will open the gate as before, invited through, and then begin again with the second half. The ledger waits with its next line clean and unassuming, and the brush lies across the inkstone, its bristles pointed toward the margin where weather notes live. The shutter lifts by the width of a beam. The canal answers, with a hum as modest as a sleeve being straightened. In the chamber, the raft's first section rises without impatience, ropes easing against posts with the small, courteous creak of fibers remembering rain. The apprentice rests the long pole across his thighs, palm open, not gripping. Hands that hold loosely can move quickly without startle. The keeper watches the wet mark on the stone, a notch cut by some careful hand long ago. When the water finds it, the keeper lowers the shutter a finger's breadth, shaping the last inches like a potter finishing a rim. He nods once. The apprentice steps to the hinge beam, shoulder settles underwood. The gate listens and turns as if deciding for itself. A wedge keeps the opening at the size the night prefers. Come, the keeper says, and the raft section obeys with its own gravity, sliding past the fender in a quiet that feels practiced rather than cautious. Beyond the gate the upper reach receives the timbers, laying a silvery line along their backs where rain smooths their bark. The raft captain lifts his chin toward the waiting post, and the section glides to it with a cooperation learned over many trips. A loop gathers around the post, the rope leans and is content. The apprentice sets the gate back, seats the pin, and listens for that small seated note that means wood is thinking straight again. A gentle aside. Large things ask only that you make them believe the world is spacious and steady, then they behave as if they were small. They begin the second breath. The chamber, having just spoken in an upward tone, clears its throat for a downward phrase. The lower shutter opens to let the level fall, a smooth diagonal written in water. The apprentice watches the eddies fold and unfold against the stone, finding in their repeated shapes the comfort of a familiar inn. When the lines settle, the captain gestures, and the remaining raft section noses in, wearing the night's gloss. In this half, a peripheral rope remembers that it is a plant before it is a tool. It stretches, then considers loosening. The captain frowns a little, not alarm, only attention, and gives a quick, soft call. The apprentice is already there, pole angled just so, asking the raft to respect the chamber's shoulder. The rope, moody from rain, argues by a finger's width. The apprentice leans the pole a hand's breadth more, not to push but to remind. The line shrugs and returns to its work. The captain lifts to fingers an acknowledgement, and the matter dissolves like steam leaving a lid. A gentle aside, disputes between rope and current are best settled before either remembers it can raise its voice. The rise begins again. The keeper opens the upper shutter, beam width, then beam and a half, then back to beam when the sound rounds to eagerly. The raft section floats upward with the kind of patience that has nothing to prove. The apprentice stands with his pole across the timbers, relaxed to the eye but ready at the wrist. The captain hums that same short line, less a song than a straightening of breath. The keeper's wife places a dry cloth by the door, folded in fourths. Someone will pick it up without looking when the moment chooses them. Midnight takes shape slowly, like ink finding its way through a brush. The rain thins to a finer script, and the lantern's light broadens a touch as the air clears. A night bird says a single syllable from the bank and considers it enough. The ledger lies open to a fresh line, half filled with characters that keep their strokes close, unwilling to spill into their neighbor's space. The water meets the notch. The keeper settles the shutter. The gate yields, the wedge pauses it, and the raft's second half slips forward a balanced exhale. Outside, the captain and apprentice guide the timbers together until both halves remember they are one body. The joining rope receives a firm pull, a twist, and a small pat of the hand, the way one settles a blanket's corner. It will hold. The captain tests two other ties, their voices thrum, low and dependable, when plucked with a fingertip. They convene under the eave where the night has placed a table of dry boards, and the tea has not forgotten its duty. The travel board is unwrapped from its oiled cloth and set on the square of protective linen. The keeper brings the weight drawer forward, revealing its tiny court of measured stones. Rafts pay by count and cut, and tonight's tally answers what the board promised. Coins change hands with a hush. A bamboo tally slip receives a notch for clearance, then slides into its place in the captain's tube. The brush is lifted. Ink gathers again beneath its bristles. The keeper writes, midnight, raft into sections, timber sound, rope sound after adjustment, and gives the weather its dot and dashing easing. The seal's vermilion circle sits on the margin like a small moon content with its roll. The sand tray sprinkles its patient cure, and the keeper blows once, the way one encourages a sleeping coal to remember warmth. The apprentice walks the length of the platform to make the hour's small inspections. Hinge pins are seated, wedges are present, gongs hang calm, rope coils sit with their tails tucked. At the chamber, water presses gently at the gates, no longer with curiosity, only with companionship. He lifts the long pole and sets it back into its hook so that the iron bands will not remember damp more than necessary. He stands still a moment and listens to the absence of complaint. It is a reliable music. A gentle aside, the middle of the night is when machines with few parts speak their clearest truths. To small boats past the far bend, lamps low. They signal the shared decision to wait until dawn to lock through. The keeper answers with a raised lantern and a tilted palm that means good choice. They moor to the courtesy posts, upriver where reeds keep company. Quiet agreements save more strength than loud commands. Back in the hut, bowls meet warm water, then the dry cloth. The keeper's wife folds the cloth back into quarters and lays it near the brazier. She opens the rice pot a moment, the last portion sits like a modest promise. She will wake the pot near the watch change, so Anne's arriving from sleep will be met by food that remembers what warmth is good for. The apprentice checks the toll drawer, moves a bead along its wire, and closes it with a thumb pressed to the smooth wood. He runs a finger down the ledger's latest line and feels the slight rise of ink that now belongs to the day's remembered skin. The keeper dots a tiny mark at the very edge of the page, a private sign between him and the book that the hour has slid across the middle into the balanced second half. Outside, The rain pauses long enough to let the canal show its own face. The lantern prints a gold oval on the water. The oval stretches and returns like breathing. Somewhere downreach, a dog barks twice and then decides silence holds the better story. The captain, satisfied with ropes and notches and seals, puts on his hat and gives a half bow that matches the knight's modesty. The raft drifts into its lane, its sections pleased to be whole. The gates stand closed, shoulders resting against their stops. The shutters nestled into their notches. The water writes a long, horizontal sentence with no punctuation for a while. The keeper sets the brush to rest across the inkstone at a diagonal that keeps its tip honest. He pours a small line of hot water into the shallow dish that holds the seal, and wipes the stamp clean. Vermilion likes to sleep tidy. Night folds itself into a quieter fabric. The lantern keeps its small, dependable circle on the platform. The rain has stitched itself into mist. Somewhere downstream, a bell strikes twice. Spaced far apart, then rests. The lock breathes as a room does when everyone is asleep. But not deeply. It expects company. A pale drift of light gathers behind the clouds. It is not morning yet, only the thought of morning. The keeper's wife lifts the lid of the rice pot. Steam rises in a patient column and writes on the underside of the roof, then disappears. She loosens the grains with a wooden paddle so they do not take offense at being asked again to be useful. She ladles a little hot water into the teapot and wakes the leaves with a turn of the wrist. The hut smells like starch, leaf, and charcoal, a school for comfort. Downreach, 3 lamps appear in a row, low and steady. They keep a thumb's width of darkness between them so that their message can be read. The apprentice steps to the edge and shades his eyes with his palm, not because the lights are bright, but because habit likes a roof even in the open air. He counts the beats of their sway. "Salt," he says, the way one names a friend at the gate. The keeper answers with the gongs to small taps on the right, then a patient space, then a single note on the left. Hold that distance, chamber preparing. The lamps blink in agreement, each in its small language. Salt boats move with manners learned from long supervision. Their cargo rides old rules and likes tidy records. It also likes not to get wet. A gentle aside, salt was often the kind of cargo that brought officials stamps and counting to the water. Locks answered with carefulness that never had to be dramatic. The chamber sleeps at the upper level. The last raft has gone on its way. The keeper opens the upper shutter a measure, then a measure more, to lay the inside level gently back toward the lower reach. The sound is like silk being folded. The apprentice leans a shoulder against the gate beam and waits for the keeper's nod. It comes as a small lowering of the lantern. The gate turns. The wedge settles into its acquainted groove. The chamber shows its calm face to the downstream side. The first salt boat noses into view and takes the waiting post with a neat loop of line. Even in mist, the boat looks dry. Canvas screens have been lowered along the cargo bays. On either side, the cloth bows inward slightly and sheds beads of water like a duck's good coat. On deck, jars sit in square nests, each wrapped with straw bells. Others are sealed tubs with the steady look of clay that has seen many kilns. A scribe sits under a little roof, ward and lap brush tucked behind his ear, documents in an oiled sleeve. He lifts the sleeve a finger's width to show he has nothing to hurry. The keeper returns the sign, A small lift of the seal box, a tap to the corner of his ledger. The scribe inclines his head. The apprentice offers the mooring line up to the boatman with both hands, as one gives a bowl. Warm water, the keeper's wife asks, voice as even as the canal. She hands a cup to the boatman, then to the scribe, then places a third near the coil of rope for hands that will arrive tardy. A dish of salted greens appears, small and precise. Salt smiles at meeting itself. The scribe's board opens. Papers, dry as if they live indoors, unfold with creases that fall the same way every time. The keeper lifts his lantern a little under the hut eave to spare the paper from direct breath. Stamps match stamps, counts match counts. Where there is a number, the scribe points with his little finger, not with the brush. The keeper replies by tracing the same mark in the ledger's margin, thin and straight. No one comments on the neatness. Neatness understands itself. A gentle aside, in places that live by records, silence is often praise. The boat enters the chamber. The apprentice takes the pole with the iron band and holds it not like a spear but like a staff at rest. He keeps the pole's tip 3 finger breadths above the jar ends. The boatman watches his own left hand, which holds the line just loose enough to let the boat breathe. The keeper lifts the upper shutter by the width of a bean no larger. Salt rides higher than grain. A slosh would be impolite. The water climbs carefully, more suggestion than motion. The boat inches up until the jar ends meet the world they expect, and the keeper settles the shutter with a pinch. Gate, wedge, word. The boat slides out into the higher reach, its screen still shedding small glassy beads. The scribe places one red stamp where the luxe mark prefers to live, then cradles the paper back into its sleeve. He nods to the keeper's seal box as if two instruments had tuned together and found the note. The second boat comes in the same way, then the third. Between each, the keeper's wife spoons rice into bowls and sets them on the bench inside the hut. The apprentice eats standing, 2 quick mouthfuls between gates, chopsticks clicking once against the rim like a tiny metronome. The keeper takes his rice in 3 pauses, after a wedge, after a shutter, after a stamp. The scribe accepts a bowl and eats in little squares of time that do not touch the paper. Mist thins. The far bank appears like a thought remembered. The current finds its gloss again, silver not from sun, but from habit. A single reed along the bank makes a tiny bow to the air, and then straightens the lanterns. Circle looks less lonely, a gentle aside. Dawn rarely rushes a canal. It comes as a correction, not an announcement. With the salt convoy through, the keeper writes a line that chooses its words with care. 3 boats, seals verified, jars and tub sound, passage uneventful. In the weather square he draws a short horizontal, then a higher one. Mist climbing is given to lines in this book. The seal finds its place, a red moon resting on calm strokes. The apprentice closes the weight drawer, moves a bead, and runs a dry cloth over the balance, as if saying, "You did well, sleep now. There is time before change of watch." The apprentice walks the stone sill with a short-handled brush and a pan of clean water. He scrubs the line where boots write their muddy signatures and guides the water to the drain. The keeper crosses to the downstream bank and checks the courtesy posts, tapping each with the end of the pole. The tone answers tight and true. He kneels at the lower shutter housing and wipes a line of fine grit from its lip, small as a fingernail. but worth not letting it grow into a word. The keeper's wife folds the towel, adds a splash of hot water to the pot for anyone who wants a last cup, and wipes the table's edge with a cloth that smells faintly of tea. She takes the spare rain cape from its peg and turns it so the inner weave can dry. The hut, the bench, the bowls, the cup hooks, each looks as though it expects morning and knows how to greet it. Across the reach a rooster offers two careful notes and decides against a third. The cloud bank above the east loosens the tightness in its weave and admits a paler thread. On the platform, the lantern's flame looks a little shy now. It learns the trick of being useful without being prominent. The keeper trims the wick anyway because tools enjoy being tended even when they are about to rest. Morning does not arrive all at once. It gathers in the wet leaves on the bank and under the eaves where drops pause a little shorter before falling. The hut's brazier breathes with less effort. The keeper looks at the lantern and sees that it has become mostly a habit of light rather than a need. Still, habits deserve a careful ending. He lifts the cap, pinches the wick between two wetted sticks, and the flame leans into sleep without a fuss. A curl of smoke makes a brief ribbon and loosens away into the mist. The apprentice takes a soft brush to the lamp's glass, removes the night's small soot, and sets the chimney to dry on its hook. Oil is topped with the patient tilts of the bottle. The wick is trimmed square where it had grown shy. The lantern, tended, looks ready to be unimportant for a while. Tools, like people, are calmer when they know their neck's quiet. On the platform the chamber rests at the lower level. The keeper opens the upper shutter by a finger's breadth, then closes it with the same small measure, confirming the pin's willingness to sit exactly where it is asked. He moves to the lower shutter and lifts it just enough to hear water speak in a polite consonant, then lets it hush. Hinges receive one last touch along their pins where oil is in a dim sheen. The apprentice runs the side of his thumb across the wedge's face. No splinters wish to introduce themselves today. A gentle aside, before a shift changes, most of the work is listening for the absence of quarrel. Across the reach, the east loosens another tone. The far bank lifts out of gray reed by reed, as if someone were rewriting the scene in clear ink. From upriver, a barge shows a single lamp and then extinguishes it, a sign that says, "I will wait for day." The keeper answers with a slow raised palm, the gesture that belongs to people who work more with admission than with instruction. Inside the hut, bowls that sat drying upside down are turned right side up. The keeper's wife lays a clean cloth along the bench and sets 3 bowls on it, one for the apprentice, one for the day keeper who will arrive, and a smaller one that often finds its way into a newcomer's hands. She stirs the rice so steam can remember its own path, then slips in a pinch of the pickled greens that woke earlier mouths. A pot of tea, having learned night's tempo, agrees to pour itself in shorter sentences. The ledger waits, open to the last line of the night. The keeper wets the brush, rubs the inkstone once, twice, no more is needed, and writes the hour's ending. Watch complete with no complaint, shutters at rest. Hinges oiled, lantern extinguished, and in the weather square places to dots, and a small upward tick mist lightening. He sets the seal in vermilion and pauses, letting the red settle into the paper's fibers, not pressed hard, just asked to belong. The apprentice stands at the measuring staff set into the bank, where numbers have been carved to share the canal's height in a language that even tired eyes can read. He notes the level with a small piece of charcoal on a scrap that will travel into the margin of the book. He steps along the courtesy posts and taps each with the heel of his hand. Their voices line up in the same agreeable note as last night. The long pole is returned to its hooks, iron bands wiped, not because rust threatens this instant, but because iron prefers to be reminded that it is seen. A gentle aside. Care is the practice of noticing small things before they remember to become large. Footsteps come along the bank, regular and unhurried, the sound of straw sandals bringing someone who knows both night and morning. The day-keeper arrives with his rain cape folded over his arm, hat tucked to the back of his head so the brim does not shade the first color he wants to notice. He greets the water first, then the platform, then the people. The order changes nothing, but it pleases him to hold it that way. "Quiet?" he asks, as if the answer might be a gust. "Quiet," the night keeper says, the word falling softly between them and staying there. They go together to the uprights and run knuckles along the same grains of wood, repeating touches proof rather than doubt. They stand at the sill and watch water decide on its small whirls. The apprentice leans his shoulder under the beam, then steps away so the day-keeper can feel the weight answer his own bones. It does, with the honest steadiness of wood in a simple task, and he nods. Transfer is not a ceremony, but it has its phrases. The night keeper opens the ledger and reads not all at full voice, only the marks that matter today: grain boat, raft to parts, salt convoy 3, rain easing, no loose pins, 1 rope considered mischief and reconsidered. The day-keeper listens with his eyes at the water and his ear at the voice. He makes a small notch with the brush at the margin where his watch begins. The apprentice moves a bead along the counting wire to match that notch and clears the ink dish so morning's ink will not carry night's thoughts unless asked. The keeper's wife sets bowls in their hands. Rice meets tea in a steam that is both familiar and particular. They eat in the standing calm of people who have been moving slowly for many hours and are practiced in letting food travel the last distance without ambition. The day-keeper takes the smaller bowl and passes it to the apprentice with a look that says you did the longer walking. The apprentice accepts and bows not down but forward, a glance of gravity shared. From the bank a duck delivers a conversational comment and is satisfied by its own answer. A dog barks once on a far lane and then remembers bread. The canal surface loses the last of its woolly look and chooses satin instead. The first true yellow catches the underside of a low cloud, then lets it go. Reed tips darken as their dew decides to belong to air again. The night keeper closes the ledger with a soft fold of its cover, winds the cord twice and then across, the pattern that keeps pages willing to remain in order. He slides the seal box back into its place and sets the little key on the nail above, the nail that also remembers a small string of dried gourds in flood season. The lamp chimney, dry now, returns to its body. The lantern sits on its hook as if it had always chosen that spot. The gongs are wiped and turned so their mouths face the path boats will see first in morning. A gentle aside. In many trades, saying good morning to your tools is the same as saying good night to yourself. The day-keeper walks the far side of the chamber with the apprentice, who names last night's small changes with a finger. This pin re-oiled, that wedge planed yesterday, that groove brushed, that mark on the stone chosen for our rise. The day-keeper repeats anything that might wander off if not spoken twice. They reach the post where visitors tie and find a tuft of straw the raff has left. The apprentice lifts it and sets it in the sweep pan. Even stray ends deserve a place. When the ledger's cord is tied and the weight drawer clicked shut, when the shutters have been asked to sit and have agreed, when the lantern is clean and the gongs content, the night keeper looks once more across the water that has been his partner in the dark hours. He feels the particular likeness that comes only when nothing has made its way onto the list of repairs. He bows to the day-keeper in the canal's simple grammar palms together, head double-breathed, and steps back under the eave. He puts on his hat with the brim forward now because the sky contains something to shade. The keeper's wife folds the cloth, lifts the pot off the brazier so the charcoal can rest, and draws the door of the hut to a familiar nearly closed. The apprentice hangs the rain cape inside out to dry and aligns the poles in their hooks as an afterthought that has learned to arrive on time. The night keeper walks away along the bank, not quickly. His feet know the two boards where the plank is a hair higher. They choose them without looking. Behind him, a boat's crew begins to speak in morning voices to ropes and planks and tea. Ahead, the lane smells of millet porridge and the day's first cut bamboo. Sleep walks in the same direction as he does and will find him soon enough. If your breath likes the feeling of a page closed with a clean stroke lamp snuffed, hinge quiet, brush rinsed, let it keep that rhythm a while longer. And now, leaving the water's flat grammar for a different kind of dawn, let's walk through gravel that whispers under sandals, past stone basins, into the tidy courtyards where Edo shrine caretakers greet the morning with brooms of bamboo and paper charms that sound like wind. Dawn arranges itself slowly along the shrine's eaves. The sky is the color of rice paper held to pale light, and the air contains that small coolness that remembers night but is willing to let it go. At the outer torii, the broom of split bamboo is already at work. The senior caretaker draws it across the gravel in long, unbroken lines, each stroke quiet as a sleeve. He does not chase every leaf. He invites them to gather at the edge where hands will find them without fuss. Behind him the apprentice follows with a straw basket, palm over the rim, listening to the broom's soft music and matching his breath to it. The gate is a simple kindness of wood and paint, its lintels still holding a sheen from the last oiling. Two Shimanauer-plaited ropes of rice straw wear zigzag paper streamers that look like small pieces of lightning a patient hand has folded. The caretaker touches the knots with the backs of his fingers, not to test but to greet. He finds one shide that has curled more than its neighbor and passes it to the apprentice, who replaces it with a fresh strip, crease laid with a thumbnail so it will remember the right angle. A gentle aside, at shrines, tidiness is not ornament, it is a form of breathing. Clean lines and clear puffs make room for thoughts to walk upright. They move inward along the stone path. Each slab keeps a record of sandals that have crossed it wa-rousoku in summer, clogs in rain. The apprentice pauses at the lion-dog guardians, komenu, who sit on their square bases, as if they have learned stillness by apprenticeship. He wipes their noses with a damp cloth, and runs the cloth across the curve of the open mouth, and the closed one, the pair that together say ah and un, the first and last breaths. A cobweb has chosen the angle behind one ear. The apprentice removes it not with disapproval but with a little bow to the spider's effort. Near the entrance to the worship hall, a stone lantern stands with its window dark, and a bronze one hangs under the eaves with last night's soot tucked into its corners. The caretaker lifts a soft brush and teases the soot into his pan, then wipes the glass pane with paper that does not leave lint. He straightens the wick of the little oil lamp inside, but he does not light it. Morning is building its own lamp above the trees, and the shrine prefers not to argue. To the side, under a roof of cedar, the water pavilion waits. Visitors will soon lift ladles there for the small ceremony of washing hands and mouth. The basin's water has grown thoughtful in the night and deserves renewal. The apprentice draws up a fresh bucket from the well with a clop and a rope song, then pours in a careful arc that does not break the basin's calm. He wipes the rim where lips sometimes hesitate, and sets the ladle handles all one way, so shy hands will not have to look for how to begin. A gentle aside, the washing practiced here is as practical as it is symbolic. Clean hands and a clear mouth make prayers easier to recognize when they arrive. At the steps of the worship hall, the caretaker unrolls a cloth that holds small tools. He checks the bell rope where worshippers will later reach up and wake a sound. The rope's tassel carries dust from last week's festival incense. He loosens it with a few light shakes, and the dust chooses the air. He sets two white porcelain sake flasks on the offering table, empties yesterday's water, and refills the vases that hold sakaki evergreens. New leaves, glossy and plain, take their places without ceremony. Inside the office, paper lives in shallow drawers of Fuda charms stamped with the shrine seal, omikuji fortunes folded to neat size, and a stack of ima plaques awaiting the day's wishes. The apprentice writes the date on the first page of the ledger and turns the brush so its hairs sit together. He rubs the ink stick once around the stone and then lets it rest. Words will come later. For now, the office opens its reed blinds a hand's breadth so that air can walk through. The raking begins anew in the inner court. The caretaker's broom writes straight, then curved, then straight again where the path turns. He pauses at a corner and lets the gravel settle into its new decision. The apprentice sweeps the steps, short strokes from the riser outward, collecting the night's small leaf gifts without comment. A pair of sparrows settle on the ridge tile, speak to syllables, and approve. Beyond the hall, a low storehouse keeps tools. Hooks hold the pairs of working gloves that remember sap and rope. A straw rain cloak hangs inside out from last evening's mist. The apprentice stretches the cloak so its weave opens and dries. He awes the hinge of a door that sighed yesterday. The sigh does not return. A gentle aside, Edo towns woke early, even so shrines like to be ready before the city remembered its errands. There is a kind of hospitality in being prepared before anyone asks. At the Yuma rack, offerings from other days hang with their small painted horses, birds, and hopeful characters. Some have shed a fleck of paint where rain found them. The caretaker does not retouch. He merely straightens a plaque that is tired at one corner and tightens the cord of another that would rather swing than sit. In a wooden box nearby, strips of paper fortunes that turned out unkind have been tied and left for the wind to persuade. The apprentice untangles two that have made their own conversation, and gives each its own twig, leaving space so misfortune can forget itself. They break their fast without leaving their work. The caretaker takes a small rice ball wrapped in a leaf. The apprentice receives the second. A pickle slice, sharpened by salt and vinegar, keeps the rice awake. Tea, poured into shared cups, moves from hand to hand with the same safety as a broom passed handle first. They eat standing beneath the eaves, watching the courtyard change color one notch at a time. The city out beyond the torii is stretching its back. Somewhere a vendor tests the lid of a pot. A cooper taps his hoop with a tone that means metal is in a good temper this morning. A temple bell carries to slow notes across the tile roofs, and a dog answers both by wagging rather than voice. The shrine receives the bell as a neighbor's hello and keeps sweeping. The apprentice takes a small bundle of fresh paper strips and the special wand of sakaki called a gohei. He sits on the step and folds each strip with the sharp edge of his thumb, turning paper into the familiar zigzags that make purity visible. The caretaker ties them to the wand with string that prefers to remember knots. He sets the wand by the offering table so the morning's first prayer will find a clean companion. A gentle aside, if it seems nothing urgent has happened, that is because the shrine's work is to let urgency forget its name. By the time the breeze begins to lift the bottom of the Norran curtain at the office door, the place has become the kind of clean that does not show itself off. Gravel lines invite walking but do not insist on it. Wood smells like the tree it once was, and the oil that keeps it content now. The apprentice rinses the ladle once more, turning it in his hand so the handle will dry. The caretaker brushes the last line across the path and leans the broom by its hook, bristles upward, as he was taught. The Norran curtain at the office door lifts a little, as if the air is curious. The apprentice ties it up with a neat cord so eyes will know where to look, and hands will find a counter without guesswork. He slides the reed blinds another hand's breadth and lets the morning stand just inside the room. On the shelf, bundles of omikuji fortunes wait in their twine belts. A wooden tray holds flint brushes, the inkstone still cool to the touch. The caretaker checks the offering box where coins will fall later. Its slats have been brushed free of dust, and a folded cloth rests in the corner for quiet wiping. He runs a fingertip along the edge, not to clean, but to remember the feel of a box that has earned its shine one small coin at a time. On the wall, a simple board with today's date in careful characters hangs straight. The apprentice adjusts it by a whisper of a degree, not because it was crooked, only to remind it to be particular. A gentle aside, shrines do not hurry to open. They arrive at openness like a door eased in a household where people are still sleeping. Footsteps approach on the stone path, a rhythm gentle enough to match the gravel's new lines. The first visitor pauses at the water pavilion. She is a tea seller from the next street, a basket on her arm, sleeves tied back, face soft from the cool. She dips the ladle, washes her left hand, then the right, tips the handle to rinse her mouth without swallowing, and lets the last water run down the handle to cleanse what cleansed. The apprentice, standing a step away, does not watch her so much as witness the pavilion doing its small work. She walks to the offering box and bows once, a greeting rather than a request. Two coins fall through the slats with a sound that is both brief and round, as if wood and metal had agreed not to startle each other. She draws the bell rope until the suspended clapper turns and finds the bell's lip. The sound is not loud. It is the sort of voice a careful person uses in a room full of sleeping children. She bows again, claps twice, a pair of soft leaf sounds in the morning air, and then bows a final time, longer, like a sentence that knows where to end. The caretaker stands to one side of the steps, not as judge, only as witness. He watches for things that need help, an overlong pull on the rope, a shy pair of hands uncertain about the ladle. Nothing needs him this time. The tea seller turns to the imarak. She chooses a small wooden tablet with the shrine's crest and ties it to the apprentice's offered string. She writes with a deliberate hand, characters that remember market lists and family names. She asked for steady customers this season and a dry space for her tea leaves. The ink settles, the apprentice finds a good place for the plaque where wind can see it, and sun will read it at noon. A gentle aside, practical wishes are not less holy, a roof that does not leak, and customers who return are forms of blessing the body understands without translation. Next comes a boy with his grandfather. The boy counts the steps out loud, 1, 2, 3, until the older hand resting on his shoulder suggests that numbers can be in the mind as well. They wash at the basin, the boy's first breath turning into a small laugh when the water touches his lip. The apprentice turns the ladle for him so the last trickle will not surprise. At the hall, the boy copies his grandfather's bow. He claps with enthusiasm, and then looks sideways to see if it was too much. The caretaker lets his own face become a place without edges. It gives the boy an answer that is yes without saying yes. Inside the office, the reed blinds admit enough light for fine work. A pilgrim approaches, carrying a cloth-bound book for stamps. He opens it with 2 hands. The page shows places visited, each seal like a train of red moons, calligraphy flowing between them like clouds. The caretaker cleans his brush with a slow turn in clear water, rubs the inkstone once in a small circle, and writes the shrine's name, the date, and a short blessing. The brush makes strokes that are confident without being proud. The seal vermilion and round comes last, pressed firmly enough to belong, lightly enough to be kind to paper. The pilgrim bows, thanks by folding the book as if tucking in a friend, and steps back with his mourning made slightly heavier in the best way. A gentle aside, the seal stamp is a small official sun. It does not warm by itself, but it tells the paper where warmth remembers to live. A woodworker eyes sleeves rolled, palms bearing a faint, permanent scent of cedar. He has brought a strip of cypress for the repair of a small offertory table, cut thin and planed until its shavings could almost fly. The caretaker leads him along the side path to the workshop corner, a modest lean-to where tools sleep in order. They check the wobble of a leg that has been patient too long. The woodworker tightens a peg with a tap that chooses its volume with care. He sends until the grain remembers to answer in one direction. The apprentice oils a cloth and draws it along the table's lip. The wood accepts the oil the way tired hands accept warmth. Back at the basin, a pair of merchants stand in quiet conversation that keeps its seriousness small. They share the ladle without confusion, and one offers the other a tucked handkerchief when a drop lingers on a sleeve. Their coins fall, their claps meet. One ties an unlucky fortune to the pine twig provided for such corrections. The strip flutters with relief, as if it has been allowed to turn into weather instead of news. The caretaker's wife, who keeps records, and knew the priest's grandmother, arrives with a small tray. On it sit 2 porcelain cups, and a pot whose lid fits with the confidence of old companions. She leaves the tray on the office counter, bows to the visitors with the same warmth she uses for neighbors, and retreats to the shade where she will tally the week's rice offerings. The apprentice pours 2 fingers on the pot's lid, and sets 1 cup by the ledger for the caretaker when his brush lifts. More footsteps. A courier touches the gate post politely as he passes. He will not linger. A washerwoman lays down a wrapped bundle, bows, and asks for her son's chill to loosen. A samurai, quiet in plain robes, stands to the side and lets others finish before he bows. He watches the bell as if it were a person being addressed. His claps are the softest of the morning. A gentle aside, rank tends to be loud in the street and quiet at a shrine. That is one of the places where shrines earn their keep. The apprentice returns to the office, writes 3 receipts for small donations, brush gentle, characters legible to tired eyes, and ties a paper charm to a gohei wand so that the priest, when he arrives later, will meet readiness and not have to search for it. He checks the row of omikuji once more, straightens a bundle, replenishes the empty cup of pens that visitors may borrow to write their plaques. He watches the coin box for a moment to be sure the slats are catching coins well. If one sticks, he tips the box by a breath and the coin joins its fellows with a contented click. Mid-morning gathers, but only just. The light tastes a little sweeter, as if it has remembered fruit. The breeze finds the imarak and reads a few new wishes aloud without moving its mouth. On the steps, sandals come and go familiar, anonymous. All equally held by stone that never brags about how many feet it knows by weight alone. By late morning the light has learned where to stand. It enters the courtyard as if it has been invited many times and knows not to scuff the gravel. The apprentice brings a tray of omikuji to the office counter, loosens the twine around one bundle, and fans the paper slips like a quiet deck of clouds. Visitors reach for them with 2 fingers, lift one, and let chance be small and polite. Some fortunes smile immediately, others raise an eyebrow. The apprentice offers a soft cord and points to the pine where uncertain fates can be tied to travel on the wind rather than the mind. On the bench near the marak, a young seamstress writes in characters that prefer neat hems. She asks that the straight stitch run true, and that winter cloth sell steadily. The caretaker adds a tiny notch to the rack's peg where cords have rubbed smooth, where likes to be noticed before it speaks loudly. He checks the spacing between plaques and leaves to open places for wishes that will arrive as the sun leans west. A gentle aside, most prayers are errands with manners, food on the table, roofs that do not argue with rain, hands that remember what they were taught. Inside the office the brush finds its morning pace. The caretaker sits at the low desk with sleeves tied back and ink softened to a gray that likes paper. He writes a few small household charms, each with the shrine's name and a line that bends like a bamboo stem just before it straightens. The apprentice lays finished slips on a board in pairs so they dry without curling, then slides them, once quiet, into the drawer that knows their order. A little bowl of red vermilion waits for the seal. The stamp enters, leaves its firm round, and returns to the bowl as if returning to a pond. Across the courtyard a woman and her daughter arrive with a basket wrapped in indigo cloth. They bow at the torii, wash at the basin, and present the basket at the office with 2 hands. It holds small persimmons, a handful of chestnuts, and a neatly folded square of bean cakes. The caretaker's wife records the offering with characters that save ink and respect space. She returns a paper charm in exchange, wrapped in a sleeve of clean paper, and places 2 cakes aside for the workbench food that helps brushes write kindly. The incense cupboard opens with a hinge that has forgotten squeaks. Inside, cedar boxes hold sticks that remember forests and resins. The apprentice selects a thin bundle and carries it to the bronze burner up the hall side. He lights 1 stick from a slender spill, breathes it awake, and then invites the smoke to coil under the roof. The first thread rises straight, then folds upon itself, and thinks better of stubbornness. Soon the air tastes faintly of countryside and winter temples. Though this is a Shinto place, the smoke is used sparingly and more for courtesy than doctrine. A gentle aside. In Edo, shrines and temples lived like neighboring shops, different inventories, similar brooms, borrowed scents, and shared courtyards were less argument than weather. At the water pavilion a fish seller arrives, hands clean already from his own basin, sleeves rolled above the forearms that lift tubs each dawn. He sips from the ladle in the careful way of a man whose mouth often meets river air. He writes and ema quickly characters like fish marks asking that the morning's catch travel briskly from basket to pang. He lifts the bell rope, gives it the measured pull of someone accustomed to scales, and bows a long bow that lets conversation end with the shrine's answer rather than his. The caretaker and the apprentice walk the boundary together. They stop at each small gate tie and test the nut that keeps casual animals from curious wanderings. A low bamboo fence has sagged near the camellia, where rain remembered to be heavy last week. The apprentice lifts the rail, the caretaker wedges a short block beneath with a palm that has solved many small drops, and sags. The rail, reminded, stands a thumb higher and promises to hold its shape until evening repairs can make politeness permanent. At the office, a courier returns, this time not to pass through. He opens his cloth-bound book and asks for a Gashuin seal. The caretaker chooses a brush with longer hairs, adds a few drops of clean water to the inkstone, and writes slowly, giving each stroke enough air that it will not bump its neighbor. The characters read like a path in the mountains up, pause, across, down, rest. The seal lands afterward with its round, warm weight. The courier watches without impatience, closes the book gently, and presses it to his chest before tucking it into his sleeve. A gentle aside, the book collects places, but what it mainly gathers is the unhurried way of receiving a mark and carrying it well. Just before noon the priest arrives from the side lane in plain robes, umbrella folded, steps that have learned to be heard only by stones. He greets the caretakers with the same bow he gives the altar, nothing extra, nothing less. He inspects the hall, nods at the even water in the vases, and lifts the gohei one to check that its paper zigzags are crisp. The apprentice smiles the very small smile of someone whose folding remembered the angle. The priest thanks without saying the word. His eyes are old enough to speak economy. They pause for the midday bell. The rope hangs with its twist lying as it should, neither too tight nor too casual. The priest stands at the side, palm resting on the rope's braid. The caretaker takes the pull. The clapper turns, touches the lip, and the bell answers, with a tone that does not claim distance, only clarity. It fills the courtyard the way warm water fills a basin, contour first, then center. The sound faintly visits the street beyond. It declines to argue with carts and calls. The caretaker's wife sets lunch on the bench, a lacquered box with rice that holds barley for strength, pickled radish cut so thin light can almost pass through, and a small dish of simmered burdock and carrot, brown and orange like earth and day. There is miso, mild and shy steam remembering seaweed. They each standing or sitting on the step, whichever their knees prefer. Chopsticks click once, twice, then quiet. The apprentice pours tea last and sets a cup by the offertory table for the priest. He nods and waits until the last visitor at the basin has finished, then drinks. Work returns without changing temperature. The apprentice mends a frayed broom, wrapping its waist with new cord, drawing it tight with the back of a spoon so the twist lies flat and will not bite the hands. The caretaker writes 3 receipts, stamps to Ophuda, and lines up paper envelopes with string already threaded through their small punched moons so the afternoon can move without looking for tools. He oils the door latch that spoke too loudly at mid-morning. Now it knows the volume of a library. A pair of carpenters come with shoulders that tell their trade sooner than words. They bow to the hall, then to the toost, then to the men who live there. They examine a cracked roof tile that sat one winter to many. The crack has not reached the nail hole. Luck likes timeliness. They slide the tile free with a wooden lever that refuses to bully clay, slip a new tile into the line, and press it with the flat of the palm so that it sits like a note back in its staff. The apprentice gathers the old tile and writes its absence in the small repair book. North eave, furred from ridge, replaced. A gentle aside. Shrines prefer small repairs made early to large repairs made late. It is a thrift that also saves worry. At the pine where fortunes are tied, the breeze has grown conversational. Strips of paper rise and settle, a modest flock learning how to leave without traveling. The apprentice straightens a few knots that had been more hope than not, and the slips agree to stay until weather teaches them to go. He brushes a thin dusting of pollen from the basin's stone rim. Spring has sent a messenger ahead of itself. Noon pauses and seems to apologize for having disturbed anyone. The courtyard's light turns from rice paper to silk, still pale, now persistent. Somewhere beyond the gate a vendor calls once for sweet dumplings, and then remembers he should not compete with a bell he cannot see. The city's sound moves around the shrine like wa-rousoku. Stone, both keep their shapes. Afternoon arrives by deciding not to leave. The light that earlier felt like rice paper now has the quiet persistence of silk, soft, durable, willing to hang. Shadows choose the underside of the eaves and stay there as if they rented the space by the hour. The courtyard breathes a slower breath. The broom leans in its hook with bristles upward, and the water in the basin learns the temperature of the day. The apprentice brings the lantern kit from the storehouse, a folded cloth, a dish of clear oil, a little wrench to encourage stubborn screws, and thin paper for polishing glass. He begins with the bronze lantern under the eave, loosening the tiny latch that guards the pane. The glass slides free and rests on his knee. He breathes across it once, just enough to make a soft cloud, and then coaxes the cloud away with the paper, leaving a surface that pretends not to be there at all. The wick is trimmed square, not tall. A drop of oil finds the cup. The brass smiles without showing teeth. A gentle aside. Light at shrines prefers to be present the way good manners are noticed only when they are absent. Outside, the caretaker steps along the stone path with the rake. He does not redraw the whole garden, only reminds the gravel of its intentions. 2 lines meet at a corner and continue as one. He leaves that small union with space around it, a visible breath. A pine needle falls and lands with the elegance of something that has rehearsed for months. He invites it to the edge where other needles have formed a quiet company. At the office counter, a fresh sheet of thick paper lies on a board. The caretaker grinds the ink to a deeper black, then softens it with a touch of water until the brush knows how to glide. He writes a notice in a measured hand, evening offering, 7th day of the month, lanterns lit at sunset, prayers for travel and hearth. The characters stand upright as if they will bow later. The apprentice brings a small dish of vermilion, and the shrine seal lands in the lower corner with the calm weight of a round stone. The notice dries in the shade, edges held by little pebbles that also enjoy tasks. A gentle aside, announcements gain a certain authority by being brushed slowly and left where wind can read them first. Visitors still arrive, fewer now as if errands had finished their sentences. A midwife, sleeves neat, bows with the steady hands of someone who has taught many breaths how to begin. She ties an old unlucky fortune to the pine and lifts a new one from the tray. Its characters smile modestly. She nods as if acknowledging a colleague. A traveling player in plain kimono stands at the basin, rinses quietly, and, with an almost shy pulse of fingers, thanks the water aloud. He carries a small drum. He does not strike it here. The caretaker's wife sorts offerings in the shade, rice wrapped in leaves, a jar of soy, 3 persimmons, and a pair of small sweet fish dried to tenderness. She writes the donors' names in the ledger with characters that leave room for tomorrow. The apprentice weighs the coin box by hand, then opens its back gate and slides the coins into a cloth purse, the clink kept low as if to not wake a sleeping room. He tallies in pencil first, ink later, letting numbers sit before they learn to be permanent. A breeze picks up. It lifts the narrow corners of Ima plaques and reads 3 new wishes, then leaves them where they are. The gohei wand at the altar whispers with its paper zigzags a noise like clean cloth breathed on. The priest crosses the court and checks the offering table that will hold the evening's sake, porcelain washed, cups aligned, sakaki fresh. He places a folded square of paper beneath 1 foot of the table to steady a wobble the carpenters will address tomorrow. The wobble agrees to be discreet for 1 more night. At the boundary fence, the apprentice hangs to read screens that soften the view of the lane without closing it. He ties each with string that minds knots. The screens click lightly when the air speaks. On the far side, a charcoal seller pauses, his call condensed to a single syllable that does its job and disappears. A cat steps into the courtyard with a confidence learned by never asking. It sits where sun warms stone and blinks as if considering employment. The lanterns, now polished, return to their places. The apprentice checks the stone lantern's interior. A new candle sits ready, wick trimmed to an obedient point. He cleans the little window with paper moistened from his breath and frowns kindly at a fleck he missed. The fleck decides to leave. He sets the pane back. The latch clicks with the small contentment of a task that has found its endpoint. The caretaker's hands smell faintly of sesame from lunch and cedar from the incense cupboard. He carries the brushed notice to the outer gate and pins it where eyes will greet it without being commanded. The board looks at home there. A child stopping with her mother points the red seal and asks a question without words. The mother answers with a whisper that sounds like later. The child bows because the mother bows and seems pleased by how neat the movement feels inside her shoulders. A gentle aside, children often learn the grammar of shrines before the vocabulary. This is not a disadvantage. Inside the office, the apprentice sorts charms, hearth, travel, safe childbirth, fine harvest. He places each in its own stack within reach of a hand that might not know exactly what it wants until it sees the right paper. He threads new strings through envelopes with a rhythm like a loom. Each knot lies flat, each tail is cut square. He sets aside 3 for a neighbor who sent greetings last month by persimmon and could not come herself today. Mid-afternoon tilts. The sun lowers to a place that respects roofs. The caretaker returns to the basin and renews the water. He does not pour fast, he lays the water. The old water leaves with dignity along the drain and becomes part of the garden's patience. He wipes the ladle handles once more and turns them all in the same direction so that hands may find a pattern and be soothed by it. Near the workshop corner, the woodworker returns with a wedge for that wobbling table. He slips it under with the thumb's advice and tests. The table chooses stillness with gratitude. The caretaker notes the fix in the repair book and draws a small box around the entry, the shrine's version of a satisfied nod. The woodworker accepts a cup of tea, drinks in 3 pauses, and leaves with the wedge's twin in his sleeve, just in case tomorrow remembers a different angle. The priest pauses by the incense burner. He does not add more. Evening scent will be the oil and wick of lanterns and the narrow, clean smoke of rice straw if any visitor brings it for purification. He steps inside the hall and folds a cloth along the altar rail, then places 2 grains of salt in a dish at the threshold, a courtesy to feet and to thresholds alike. A gentle aside, salt, rice, water, and paper are the shrine's alphabet. Most sentences can be written with them. The street beyond the torii grows polite again. Vendors soften their voices. Carts creak as if they have learned a lullaby. Somewhere a neighbor's wind chime tries 3 notes and keeps the second. The cat decides to remain on its topic of sunlight. The apprentice checks the sky and sees that blue has begun to remember gray. Lantern hour approaches, not with hurry but with certainty. The caretaker sets a small tray, a fire spill, a clay pot with coals, a folded fan to encourage flame without scolding it. He lights the first lantern under the eave. The wick accepts fire in a quiet handshake. The glass gleams, then chooses to be invisible. He moves to the next, and the next. Stone lanterns wait. He will visit them as the light shifts. The office blinds lower by a hand's breadth. The notice by the gate earns its first true readers. 2 neighbors stop, absorb the brush lines, and nod as if reminded of something they had already promised to remember. The apprentice brings out a little bell whose voice is meant for courtyards, not streets. He tests it with a fingertip. It replies with a tone that could carry a candle across a room. Dusk begins with the courtyard choosing gentler colors. Edges soften. The air, thinner by daylight, thickens a little and picks up the faint sweetness of oil-warmed underglass. The apprentice carries the clay pot with its patient coals. He tips a spill into the ember's quiet mouth, then lends it a breath. A slim flame wakens without argument. 1 by 1, lanterns accepted. The wicks take fire like polite hands meeting, and the panes hold a gold that seems to come from within wood as much as from flame. The caretaker visits the stone lanterns last. He kneels, slides open a square window, and sets a candle upright with 2 fingers and a thumb, the way he was taught. The match becomes a small sun, touches wick, and retires. He closes the window. The lantern's carved sides glow as if the stone remembered summer. Shadows gather themselves into comfortable corners, no longer duties, but choices. A gentle aside, evening light in such places is not bright. It simply gives objects a way to remain visible without insisting on their names. Visitors thin to pairs and single steps. A woman in traveling clothes, straw hat tied under her chin, pauses at the basin. She pours the ladle's last water along the handle and nods to the silence that follows. At the offering box she bows, claps twice, and bows again, a sequence that has learned its own length. Her coin's soft fall is absorbed by wood that has heard coins enough to forget the sound. The priest stands at the hall with the gohei wand, paper zigzags clean and sure. The caretaker sets the small offering white rice in a hill no higher than his knuckle, a thimble of sake, to neat salt mounds. The apprentice aligns the cups so their rims rehearse the same circle. A reed mat is straightened by the push of a flat pan. They step back until sandals touch the step's edge. The priest gives a brief purification, 3 quiet flourishes that gather dust you cannot see and send it to the ear that can handle it. His voice, when it comes, is narrow and steady, almost as if he were speaking to the wood so it will feel remembered. A gentle aside, short rites do not mean small meaning. They are simply sized to fit the container of an ordinary evening. The bell rope gets a measured pull. Its voice travels only far enough to introduce the hour to the neighborhood. The breeze answers by lifting the norn at the office door. The apprentice returns it to calm with a touch. On the steps, 2 children at their mother's side imitate bows like a game whose rules they like. The caretaker's wife, as if by instinct, steps away to give the family their square of privacy, yet remains in sight if help is needed. It is a choreography learned without mirror. After the service, the evening's ledger needs to hear what happened. The apprentice fetches it to the counter. The caretaker wets the brush and writes with a hand that still has days' patience, now willing to settle into nights. Lanterns lit at sunset, all wicks square, stone lanterns to newly trimmed, basin renewed for evening, ladles aligned, offerings received, rice, chestnuts, persimmons, roof tile, north eaves, settled, announced, paper posted, and read by 6 neighbors. Bells sounded gently once for evening. In the margin a small notation, cat in courtyard, friendly, no mischief. The vermilion seal, pressed and lifted, mirrors the moon to come. Coins are counted at the back gate of the box, not in the open. The apprentice slips the wooden catch, tilts the drawer, and lets the day's tin and copper pool in a cloth purse that makes almost no sound. He counts by 10s with his thumb, then ties the purse's neck twice and places it in a lacquered tray whose interior remembers many evenings. Numbers go to pencil first, then to ink. Ink likes to arrive once certainty has cleared a place for it. The basin, faithful all day, is rinsed one last time. The apprentice empties it part way, reinstates a clean depth, and lays the ladles with handles to the right, bowls resting lightly. He wipes the stone lip with a cloth that has learned to keep lint to itself. A pine needle drops just beside his foot and is escorted to the compost basket, which enjoys important duties more than it lets on. Wine has become a guest that knows the house. It flicks the paper fortunes tied to the pine and reads them without untying. A few knots receive an extra turn from the apprentice's fingers. Nearby, EMA plaques move less than before, as if they too are listening. From the lane comes the smallest percussion, clogs pausing, a cart that does not mind its creak, water from somewhere deciding to find a lower place. The shrine joins these sounds by refusing to add any others. The caretaker checks the fences once more and runs his knuckle along the new wedge beneath the offering table, still firm. He slides the workshop door shut and sets a pin through its loop. Tools like to be told rest. The incense cupboard closes. A finger presses the latch with just enough to feel a click, not enough to complain. The priest lifts the gohei wand to its place, studies the altar for a count of 3 breaths, then leaves it to continue being altar without an audience. A gentle aside, The last tasks of a day are not the opposite of morning's beginnings. They are the same gestures with endings braided in. The caretaker's wife returns with a small tray to cups, a last pour of tea made gentle by its second water, and a sweet bean cake halved and set on paper. For writing hand and watching eyes, she says, but only to the air. The apprentice eats his half in 3 tastes. The tea is cool enough to tell day it has done well. Lanterns are checked as the sky chooses its indigo. Glass, clean earlier, now proves it by not catching the flame's edge. Wicks carry an even thread of burn, none gutter, none brag. The stone lanterns are visited once more, their candles sit upright and shorten with manners. The caretaker touches each door to ensure it holds. He shadows the flame with his hand in courtesy, not to test, and takes note of how the glow lies across the steps. The office blinds lower to a hand's width above the counter, a sign that help remains near, but business has finished its speaking. The notice at the gate will stay through tomorrow's afternoon. Then find its way to the ledger, pasted and dated, where it will be a memory that does not leak. The last visitor of the evening arrives in no hurry. The same samurai from morning, robes unadorned, straw hat now in his hand. He bows once, claps softly, bows again. His coin speaks faintly as it joins the others. He turns toward the rack, reads to lines written by strangers, smiles in a way that seems to include them, and leaves without lending his own words to it tonight. The caretaker bows as he passes, and in that exchange nothing needs a name. Closing gathers like a well-folded letter. The apprentice props the office door and sweeps the threshold, the day's final strokes, short and forgiving. The broom goes to its hook with bristles upward. The cord wraps twice and ties with a loop, easy for morning hands. The basin's ladles are hung. The pail is turned upside down to dry. The coin purse is placed in the chest that clicks only once. The key goes to its nail where moonlight will notice it. The priest gives a last nod to the hall and steps away. The caretakers stand at the torii with their palms together for the length of a quiet inhale. The courtyard looks back in good temper, no corners unsettled, no tools restless, no flames indecisive. The cat rises, stretches one vertebra at a time, and chooses the lane. The gohei's paper stirs once, and then becomes still. They snuff the eve lantern closest to the office, not all, only the one that tells passers-by that the day has tucked itself in. Snuffers lower like a closed eyelid. Smoke writes one soft line and erases itself in the same moment. The apprentice slides the office door to the width of 2 fingers. The wife wipes the counter with a cloth that dries in one pass and sets the brush to rest on its wooden pillow. Ledger closed, cord crossed, seal box nudged into its corner. The shrine wears night properly now. The caretakers step through the gate, turn, and bow not to the building but to the work. The city folds around them, quieter by custom, respectful by habit. Their sandals choose the stones that remember their feet. Behind them, lantern light remains for a while like a sentence that did not need a period but received one for courtesy's sake. If your breath would like to stay with this ending flame trimmed, would content paper asleep, let it repeat these small completions until it forgets to count them. And as lanterns keep their watch far behind us, let's cross water and time to a peat-scented cottage along Ireland's west wind, where hearth and herb shelf meet, and cleanliness is taught with linen line, and a handful of quiet cures whispered by the fireside. Morning opens the half door like a book read many times. The top panel swings wide to let weather and light climb in. The lower stays closed to persuade hens to keep their opinions outside. Air travels across the flagged hearthstone, warms its hands near the banked peat, and settles kindly under the thatch where last night's smoke has already explained itself to the rafters. On the hob an iron kettle carries yesterday's shine, black and honest, polished by hands and by ash. The cottage is one room learning to be many. A settled bed keeps its secrets along the gable wall, boards closed like a wardrobe, quilts folded into patience. A long table waits by the window, surface smoothed by bread boards and talk. A dresser holds its blue-edged plates like a parade that prefers to whisper. In the cool shadow near the door, a chest shelters linens with a bar of soap wrapped in cloth. The faint perfume of fat and lye keeps moths polite and cloth confident. The first task belongs to the fire. The woman of the house kneels at the hearth, lifts last night's sods of peat with the same care you give to sleeping children, and finds the red that survived in the ashes soft bed. She gives it a breath through the hollow of a goose quill. The ember brightens, as if remembering its name. A dry turf sod, then another, then a twist of straw, and the flame resumes its quiet work, blue at its root, orange at its manners. The kettle moves closer without comment. A gentle aside, peat burns with a patient heat and leaves ash that is not waste. In small houses, fuel and cleaner are often the same family. While the kettle considers, the floor receives its morning attention. There is no carpet here, only a hard earth mixed with lime and pounded until it has learned firmness. A handful of clean sand is sprinkled over it like salt on porridge. The broom birch twigs bound to a hazel stick glides in short, firm strokes, lifting the sand and dust together so they can leave without fuss. The doorstone is wiped with a damp rag, then rubbed with a little dry ashes till it shows a modest, chalky brightness under the step. At the settle bed, quilts travel to the rope back of a chair and to the half-door's inner rail. Air and light are the day's first physicians. The tick stuffed with chaff and straw gets a shake that wakes its corners. Sheets brief, then fold into squares that remember edges. A small pillow receives a pat that restores its shape, and a second pat that thanks it for last night's work. From a shelf near the chimney, jars hold leaves that once grew under rain. Nettles gathered while they were tender, meadow sweet for headaches, peppermint for unsettled bellies, and a small paper parcel of crush in a coral-like seaweed dried dark and light. The shelf also keeps 2 blue bags, each a strip of cloth holding a pinch of laundry blue. They are no more magical than indigo and starch, but they act like a promise in the wash. Linens will come out looking as if clouds had taught them how to be white. A gentle aside, the cottage pharmacy is a matter of lanes and seasons. Remedies are remembered by hand more than by book, and they are filed where the eye naturally rests at shoulder height. Between kettle steam and the smell of bread, the kettle clears its throat. Oatmeal goes in stirred with the clockwise patience that porridge likes. While breakfast thickens, the hearth itself is groomed. A soot board, hooked from its nail, receives a brief brushing. The iron crane that holds pots gets a rub with ash and a damp wisp of cloth until black becomes a soft gleam. The kettle's spout is wiped, the lid turned so steam can leave with dignity. A heel of bread sits on the dresser edge to remind butter of its duty later. Whitewashing waits its turn, not every day, only when the weather smiles, and the bucket has both lime and thyme. But the evidence is everywhere. Walls that keep light, lintels that look freshly laundered, a hearth whose surround wears a clean halo. The pail stands in the corner with last week's dried drips visible as small geography lessons. The brush rests across the rim like a bridge that remembers crossings. If the brush travels today, it will skim the lintel first, then the hearthstone's neighbor stones, then any corner where smoke told too long a story. The wash corner holds its quiet tools. A wooden tub, staves bright where the hoops have kept them honest. A small ash barrel holds in its bottom like a flute made from a cask cut short and set on blocks. When soap is scarce and pennies fewer, lye will be coaxed from yesterday's ashes with hot water poured slow and caught in a bucket. It is not strong, it does not need to be. Mixed with a knob of saved fat and stewed until it agrees to be soap, it becomes the mild worker of collars and cuffs. A gentle aside, cleanliness here is not a pursuit of gleam but a pursuit of readiness. A dish that is clean is a dish that will not argue with what comes next. Breakfast is a short, warm interval. Porridge finds bowls, a little milk softens its edges. Tea follows dark, not strong, poured through a strainer that has learned patience with leaves used twice. The spoon rests on its saucer like an oar on a bank. After the last spoonful, bowls need hot water, ash, and a scrap of linen that used to be a gentleman's shirt cuff. The linen still enjoys service. Laundry day, when it arrives, begins with the chest. Linen sheets with their stitched initials, shirts, shifts, and the good cloths for Sundays come out in an order that remembers fairness. A blue bag waits in a saucer. Outside, beyond the doorstone, the bleaching green lies low and flat, a small square of grass that loves sun and dew equally. On such a day, sheets will be laid there after scalding, their threads drinking the day and the white of the sky until they look almost see-through near noon. But today is an in-between day, good for mending and for the quiet cleaning that keeps big cleaning from becoming a loud visitor. The woman sets her thimble, thread, and a small tin of beeswax on the table. A hem receives 3 even stitches, a shirt, 1 strong patch. Between seams she stands and wipes the window's inner frame with a rag dipped in thin lime water. The wood thanks her by looking less like last winter and more like tomorrow. At the dresser, plates stand edgewise in their grooves, each with a profile that knows its neighbor. The rims are wiped with a cloth dampened in warm water and a pinch of ash, then dried with a square towel kept only for drying. The iron pot from last night's stew yields its faint grease to a fist of sand and a turn of the wrist, then to hot water and the ash rag. It dries on the hearth's warm lip, pride satisfied but silent. From the half-door, the lane reports itself in gentle pieces, a cart's wooden vowel, a neighbor's greeting shaped to fit the space between houses, a dog that barks once and decides once is enough. The cottage listens while it works. By the lintel, a small bunch of sweet gale hangs to discourage flies. Its scent is a soft cousin to bay and bog. On the window ledge, a bowl of clean water receives the day's first reflection and keeps it uncomplicated. A gentle aside, people sometimes imagine such houses were dim. They were not bright, but they were exact, like landed where it was invited on the table, on the lintel. Into the folds of a towel land the rest of the room except it being soft. The day chooses to be bright without boasting. A lane of pale sky opens between clouds, and that is permission enough. The woman brings the tub to the door and tips it so the morning can look in. The ash barrel stands ready on its blocks, straw nest lining its bottom, wood ash sifted smooth as flour. She warms water in the pot slung from the crane, not to a cross boil, only to the temper that steam explains to cool air. She pours slowly. Hot water finds the ash, learns the way down, and appears below as lie the color of weak tea. It fills the waiting bucket in a thin thread that does not hurry. She tests it the old way rubs a drop between finger and thumb. It feels not like water, not like oil, but something politely slippery. Enough. She sets the bucket aside to clear, and the ash above sinks in the barrel as if satisfied to have given what it could. A gentle aside. Ash lye does not roar like soap, but dear in town, it speaks in small, good sentences to cloth that already wishes to be clean. Sheets come next from the chest folds that remember winter, initials stitched at one corner with thread that time could not argue away. Shirts, shifts, towels, and the fine long runner that walks the table on Sundays follow. Each piece is held up to the doorway for a note of light, then laid into the tub as if setting a table for water. The blue bag waits on a saucer, tied tight like a berry. The kettle is brought to a working boil. The pot's lid tips to the side to let steam stand up straight. A second bucket receives scalding water and carries it to the tub. The first pour is always a lesson. The cloth loosens its stiffness and sighs. She adds the ash lye, turns the bundle with a stick worn round by such turning, and presses with the flat of the hand to let water and day meet in the weave. Outside, the bleaching green waits with a patience that belongs to grass that has watched many Mondays. It is bordered by stones that have seen hymns and seasons, and heard gossip given only to wind and linen. She lays a board across to stools to make a bench, and brings the tub into sunlight. A child from next door arrives with a bundle of pegs in a pouch. They are split willow shaved smooth, with little shoulders that hold cloth gently. He sits on the doorstep and watches like a page in training, learning the order of the work by the way the house moves. The first rinsing is done in rainwater. A barrel by the eave keeps it soft and kind, soap like such water, and so do hands. The woman lifts a sheet from the tub. It goes heavy and obedient into the rinsing pail. She presses it down and up in measured strokes, water pouring through as if through a small meadow. The child brings a second pail on, at a nod tips it slow across the cloth so old water leaves, and new water explains itself to the threads. A gentle aside, softness in water is the difference between a linen that dries like weather and one that dries like a board. The blue bag travels next. She dips it once, twice, and whirls it in the rinsing pail until the water takes on the faintest whisper of sky. Bluing is not a color as much as a correction. It tucks the yellow out of white the way a kind hand smooths a wrinkled sleeve. The sheet returns to the blue water, swims there for a count of 10, and comes up with a modest shine that sunlight will understand. On the green, she spreads the sheet flat, edge to edge, and smooths it with an open palm. The lawn takes the weight and answers with coolness from the night still held just beneath its blades. Would do this job earlier in the year. Today, the pale heat of noon will assist. She lays another beside it, then another, each aligned with a care that feels like prayer made by hands instead of words. Clotheslines are strung from the apple tree to the shed. She checks each rope with a tug. It answers with the good tone of tightness that will not bite pegs. The willow pegs line up in her apron pocket. Shirts are wrung with a twist that does not scold the seams, then snapped once so fibers remember to stand up. 2 pegs to a shoulder, 1 to each cuff, skirts hung from the waistband, towels by their short edge so they will know straightness when dry. Between bench and line, the path becomes a ribbon of small tasks repeated until they make music. Turn, lift, ring peg. Each movement keeps the back long and the breath even. Now and then she pauses to fold a corner smooth on the green, to chase a shadow back under the cloth, to make a sign against a cloud that thinks about forgetting itself over the hill. A neighbor leans on the half door, offers a word about weather that is also a blessing, and leaves a sprig of rosemary for the dresser. The child counts pegs and decides, with arithmetic of his own invention, that there are enough. He is sent home with a slice of bread spread thinly with dripping and a promise that he may fetch the dry pegs when the wind says so. The tub, nearly empty, receives another small pour of warm lye for the last 2 cloths. She kneads them, as if they were dough that liked water better than flour. Stubborn spots submit to the knuckles, and to a little ash rubbed into the place that forgot to be careful. A brush made from coarser twigs attends to a shirt front that saw to many tasks. The brush remembers not to lift threads, only to remind them of smoothness. A gentle aside, stain here is not an accusation. It is a biography footnote. Most are content to be etiquette. By midday the green is a geography of white. Sheets lie like small fields reflecting larger ones. Lines lift and fall with the breeze, pegs keep their promises. Sun warms the cloth not with sharpness, but with a slow persuasion. Now and then she turns a sheet on the grass so the underside may weed the day as well. The smell that rises is simple: sun, bob, water, and a question of soap. A fly considers the line, is discouraged by a wisp of sweet gale, and reconsiders elsewhere. Inside, the table holds a jug of barley water cooling for later. The kettle has been shifted back to the crane's outer hook. Heat should rest, too. She wipes the table with a cloth dipped in thin lime water, then rinsed and wrung. Lime leaves a breath of clean that outlasts the wiping and gently argues with dampness. The lintel receives a stroke, the doorstone another. Each surface looks as if it had taken a deep breath. Afternoon trends the wind. She checks the line with a fingertip and finds dryness where it likes to begin at hems and shoulders. A sheet from the green is lifted, shaken, and folded once into the basket. Towels follow, answering with a crisp rustle that pleases work done well. The blue from the barrel has left only an idea behind. The cloth carries no color, only a correction, as intended. Back at the chest, each piece is folded to the measure of the shelf it will sleep on. A bar of soap wrapped in cloth slips into the corner to whisper to linens as they wait. A sprig of rosemary is tucked between 2 sheets. Sweet gale hangs by the lid. She smooths the top edges with the side of her hand and closes the chest with a push that the hinge has grown to like. A gentle aside, the best proof of cleanliness here is quiet. Things that are truly ready make no sound when put away. The pegs return to their pouch. The line is slackened a little so night will not teach it the wrong lesson. The tub, rinsed, is turned upside down to dry on the sunny patch by the wall, its shadow shaped like a small boat. Outside, the green exhales, thankful to hold only itself again. Inside, the room feels wider, as if the day had tittied the air as surely as it tittied the shelves. Afternoon stoops softly at the half door. The sun has done its share. Now the hearth will finish the lesson. On the table she spreads a thick blanket, Then a clean sheet over it. The ironing board is nothing more complicated than patience made comfortable. The sheet is pulled tight as a drum, corners tucked under like hospital corners learned from a mother, not a book. Light lies across the table in a narrow band enough to make edges honest. Starch comes first. In a brown bowl she tips a spoon of potato flour saved for this purpose, powder as pale as lifted dust. Cold rainwater loosens it, turned with a spoon until it moves like cream that has not decided to be anything else. From the kettle she steals a ladle of hot water and pours in a pencil-thin thread while the spoon keeps circles small. The mixture clears and thickens, becoming a soft glass. She returns it to the crane in a small pot and lets it blink at a quiet simmer, not to toughen, only to learn steadiness. A gentle aside, starch does not demand, it suggests. It gives cloth memory without forcing it to brag. Pieces chosen for finish weight folded, the Sunday tablecloth, napkins with their tiny red initials, a collar that knows how to look serious to shirts whose cuffs wish to hold their shape. She dips a rag into the warm starch and rubs it across the cuffs and collar bands, working the liquid into the threads with smooth thumbs. Napkins get a thinner whisper of it, the tablecloth only along its outer border where the fall will show. Each piece is wrung lightly and rolled into itself to keep the damp, even a little bundle of readiness. They rest while the irons wake. At the hearth the irons sleep on a trivet. There are two, weighty as small geese. Some people call them that too. She stands them near the peat's slow glow, not in the heart of it. Heat likes to travel into iron without being hurried. A third iron, smaller and thin at the nose for corners, lies on its side like a sparrow. When the first iron is lightly warmed, she tests it the old way, a lip to the finger, then a tap. A quick hiss says yes, but not too loud. Another test follows, touched to a scrap of brown paper. If the paper grays without scorching, the iron is ready to talk to linen. The sprinkler is nothing more than a clean muslin wrapped around water in a bottle, holes pricked in the cloth with a warm needle. She flicks the bundle over her shirt back, drops it where they are told, and begin to vanish even as the iron starts. Iron in hand, she moves from yoke to tail in long, even lanes, letting the weight do most of the speaking. The cloth answers by relaxing its stubbornness. A soft click comes when the iron settles on the trivet again. Metal cools the way stones do when evening begins by remembering. She keeps two irons walking. While one works, the other dreams beside the peat. Switch, press, breathe. Steam lifts in small sighs that smell of clean water and a faint sweetness from the starch. At the seam she tips the iron's nose and draws it like a pencil along the ridge, never too slow, never too hot. Cuffs come next. She opens each, smooths the band flat, and strokes it from buttonhole to edge until it shows a low shine that is more about well-being than gloss. A gentle aside, good ironing is less about heat than about timing. Cloth tells you when, the iron agrees. Collars are a stricter story. She slips one over a wooden collar board, just a curved stick, plain smooth, and draws the small iron around the arc, inside first, then out. When the band holds its courage, she turns to the collar leaf and presses from points inward so it will not curl. A clean rag lies between iron and cloth for the last pass. This keeps any secret soot from introducing itself. The collar cools draped over the board like a crescent moon, learning the curve it will wear on Sunday. Napkins get their own grammar. She squares each corner, pats the edges so threads look forward in the same direction, then folds into a triangle, and lays the iron along that fold until it is a decision, not a wish. Some are folded into smaller squares, stacked like pale books. The initials worked years ago with red thread at evening press a little deeper, as if they enjoyed being noticed without being praised. The tablecloth waits until the room seems to hold its breath. She spreads it across the board in halves. With the sprinkler she mists the border that will hang over the table's edge. The iron travels the hem in slow lengths, hand following to persuade warmth into the fold. At the corners she turns a neat miter with her thumb and forefinger, a habit learned by watching an older aunt who could fold bread wrappers like letters. Then she tests the cloth's memory, lifts it to the window, lets one side fall. The edge descends in a conch sheet of white, a waterfall with no stones inside. Satisfied, she sets it aside on a chair back to cool, because cooling is the quiet half of pressing. A gentle aside. Pressure writes, cooling publishes. On the hearth a little pen holds sand. If an iron sole plate has misbehaved, picked up a whisper of soot, she strokes it on the sand, and wipes with a heel of old linen until it feels as smooth as a promise. The peat glows, now and then a tiny crack sounds, no bigger than a pin's thought. Smoke knows the thatch's secret paths, and leaves without burdening the room. Outside, the lane gives back its thin music clogs once, cart once, a magpie negotiating with its own echo. She turns to small dictations. Shirt fronts get a last stroke between buttons with the thin-nosed iron. The narrow placket is taught to hold flatness. A baby's chemise mended earlier receives only a warm palm across it, no iron, because its fabric is shy and needs kindness more than instruction. A handkerchief kept for visits to town is folded into 16 squares. The last pass of the iron is light, as if to not wake it before its next pocket nap. From the dresser she takes a blue-edged towel and spreads it to receive the day's finished pile. Order matters to shelves, it lets the eye rest. Shirts lie with shoulders aligned, collars cooled sit like obedient moons on top, napkins stacked by sixes. The tablecloth is rolled rather than folded so its fall will remember water. Between layers she tucks a thin sprig of rosemary from the neighbor, not for scent alone but to remind moths of better places to visit. The irons give off the last of their day in ticks, as the trivet surrenders heat back to air. She sets them on the hearthstone edge to grow harmless, handles turned away from curious hands. The starch bowl is scraped into a jar. Tomorrow it may starch the cap strings or hems. The little muslin sprinkler is hung by the chimney to dry. A wet tool is a forgetful tool. A gentle aside. These finishes are a kind of courtesy. Cloth meets the future already in order, needing less fuss when the moment comes. Afternoon leans toward evening. Shadows lengthen to friendly rulers along the floor. She wipes the table where starch may have thought of staying, and with a last cloth dipped in thin lime water, passes once over the lintel, once along the doorstone, and once across the settle's wooden arm where an elbow will like smoothness later. The room answers by looking simpler than it was an hour ago. Outside, the bleaching green has returned to its own color. Inside, shelves hold white ready as winter. The kettle moves nearer the crane's inner hook for tea. A small pan thinks about frying slices of potato for the supper plate. The day's queen rests. Without remark, evening gathers itself at the rafters, where smoke has left faint stories, and the thatch keeps them private. The kettle rides the crane's inner hook again. its lid set a finger width askew. On the dresser, a small procession of jars becomes the cottage's quiet pharmacy, no labels, only memory and habit. Each jar keeps a season, dried thyme from a wall that faces south, meadow sweet cut when the stream hummed low, elderflowers collected on a day when bees seemed busy but not in a hurry. Peragine from a shoreline visit wrapped in brown paper and twine. She wipes the table once more, a courtesy before medicine. A clean cloth goes down, then a board with a gentle tilt so stray drops will find the bowl and not the wood. The small scales remain in town here. Doses are measured in spoons, pinches, and breaths. A little tin with a blue lid holds sweetened lemon peel saved from last winter. A jar with a cork keeps whole cloves. Another, a thumb of grated ginger that remembers warmth. A gentle aside. In houses like this, curative work is not a performance. It is housekeeping that happens to include lungs and knees as well as floors and pans. Tonight someone's cough has lingered. She sets an onion on the board, peels it until it looks like a small moon, slices it thin, and layers it in a brown mug with honey onion, honey ending with a cap of cloth tied with string. The mug finds a warm ledge near the hearth, not over much heat, just enough to persuade juices to become syrup. Later, a spoon will dip there and bring up gold and comfort. The kettle-sized small steam. For coughs that sound tight, thyme is a tender helper. She tips a spoon of the herb into a cup and drowns it with water that has just stopped speaking. A saucer covers the cup to keep the goodness in. She counts quietly to 60 twice, the way her mother taught her when numbers were bells and patience was the clapper. She lifts the saucer and smells a low garden on a summer wall. A drop of honey goes in, not to hide the taste but to remind it of kindness. Meadowsweet waits for knees. A pinch in a second cup receives water that whispers, not shouts. It will sit longer, 10 slow breaths, then be sipped as the settle's corner learns to cradle an ache rather than resist it. The old people said meadowsweet keeps the weather out of bones. Whether or not that is so, the cup warms a lap and gives evening something peaceful to hold. Peragine asks for a pot of milk. She rinses a small handful in cold water. Sea clinging sends its last wave back to the bucket, then lowers it into simmering milk with a strip of lemon peel and 1 clove. The mixture thickens, as if remembering the tide. She strains it through muslin into a bowl, leaves it to set, and sprinkles the top with a little grated nutmeg saved for rare moods. When cool, it will jiggle, mild and nourishing, suitable for throats that prefer gentle food to talk. A gentle aside, remedies like these were not prescriptions. They were conversations with common plants and easy ingredients. The measure was often, until it feels right. For a neighbor's sprained wrist, she prepares a flaxseed poultice. Water warms in a small pan. Ground seed goes in and becomes a sleep paste. Wrapped in linen and checked on her wrist until the temperature thinks of comfort rather than surprise, the packet will sit on the hearth and borrow heat from the hearth's patience. Comfrey leaves, when the season allows, join such parcels used then with trust and moderation, as many did laid between cloth and skin like a coal, green thought. Tonight winter has asked comfrey to sleep, so flaxseed and warmth will serve. On a plate near the dresser a slice of bread, slightly stale, will be browned, broken to crumbs, and moistened with a little hot milk, spread with a touch of mustard powder, and wrapped in cloth. It becomes a small chest comforter. She folds it like a letter to stern lungs and holds it to her own chest first, to test its temper. If it speaks of warmth and not of sting, it is ready to be pinned inside a shirt for a half hour and no longer. Children hearing this rule learn that even kindness counts. The house practices its own health, too. A basin with thin lime water stands ready for a last wipe where damp might think of staining the night window ledges, door corners, the table's underlip. Soot falls like dark snow when the damper is slid a little. She taps the soot board lightly and brushes it outside, where the garden is not offended by such gifts. The swept-up soot will later meet a drop of vinegar and make a humble polish for the iron range's lip, which likes to feel looked after. Evening food is simple. Potatoes boiled in their coats, a pan of slices fried in drippings, maybe an egg set carefully near the pan's warm edge. Teas poured dark and softened with a little milk, cups sit on the table where the hand can find them without looking. The cough syrup has begun to pull sweetness, a spoon tasted, not greedy, only curious. It is soothing, and Anion's voice has lowered to a whisper. A gentle aside, supper here is not a full stop, it is a comma. Work will speak again, but more softly, before bed cleans the page. After eating, the house makes its good-night rounds. The half-door's top is closed, and the lower bar is set into its sockets of timber with the sheen of many palms. The latch is noted but not fussed over in these parts. Manners are the first lock. At the hearth, the fire is banked, coals raked into a small hill, a sod of peat set on top, ash drawn around like a blanket to keep a slow heart alive until tomorrow's quill finds it again. She mixes a little ash with water to make a gentle paste. The hearthstone's front edge receives a light rub, the way a face might accept a cool cloth before sleep. The iron crane is nudged away from the heat and left at an angle that says rest. The soot board returns to its nail. A small saucer of clean water is placed by the hearth for the night, a courtesy to sparks that might dream. Grandmothers taught this, and granddaughters remember. The settle bed opens its wooden mouth, boards folded back to reveal quilts that smell of daylight. A warming brick, wrapped in flannel, visits the foot end for a moment and leaves it willing. Shirts for morning hang from pegs where their sleeves can adopt the room's quiet straightness. The chest's lid is lifted once more. Linen faces, pale and well-behaved, look back and close with a touch that barely announces itself. A sprig of sweet gale by the pillow nods to the idea that dreams deserve a simple guard. Before blankets are lifted, the cottage listens to itself. The kettle, strong all day, mutters one last time, and then consents to silence. Somewhere, a hen advises the night to mind itself. A neighbor's dog punctuates the lane, and then edits the sentence away. On the sill, the onion and honey mug glows faintly near the embers. A spoon rests beside it like a small, or waiting for a nighttime crossing if cough require. She stands at the doorstone, just inside, and speaks to lines she learned young, not loud. Not whispered words that are more about order than petition, a blessing for those under the roof and for those passing the gate, a wish for the fire to keep its place and for the wind to find kindness. The room answers by settling chairs still, cloth quiet, air even. A gentle aside, houses are like people, they sleep better when someone notices them before bed. The lamp wick is turned down, its flame becomes a seed and then a thought. In the near dark, shapes remember themselves without needing names, the day having tucked away soap and starch, herbs and heat. Now folds itself small and places itself on the shelf beside the rosemary sprig. Breath finds its own length and chooses to keep it. Night finishes the room the way a careful hand finishes a hem, one quiet stitch after another. The lamp is out. The embers think to themselves in red. The settle bed holds its small hill of quilts. They have cooled to the room's temperature, and then found a warmer patience of their own. The half-door bars are set top and bottom, and the latch string is tucked inside where fingers will not tempt it. The cough syrup is ready for duty. She carries the brown mug to the hearth, where the light is gentlest, and lifts one spoonful. It falls thick and amber, onion softened into honey's manner. The throat accepts it the way linen accepts steam, slowly, then with thanks. Another spoon waits by the mug, in case the night writes a second footnote. Beside them, a cup with the day's last time cools toward harmlessness. A sip now, a sip later, and the lungs feel listened to. A gentle aside, night medicine is less about power than about companionship. Remedies keep the body company while sleep does its work. The house makes its last practical circles. A tiny saucer of clean water sits near the hearth, a courtesy learned from grandmothers. Embers rest more politely when someone has thought about cooling. The ash blanket over the coals is checked with a spoon's back. It should lie as even as a winter field. The crane is moved so no iron hangs to near heat. The soot board is firm on its nail. On the window ledge, she sets a lump of salt in a pinch bowl, the day's reminder to damp that it has limits. By the doorstone, boots are turned on their sides. Soles are best when tucked to look at each other. A bucket, a third full, stands where the hand expects it in the dark. The small broom leans its birch twigs against the wall and grows still. The half-doors lower. Board is touched once, as if it were a shoulder being told rest now. Children, long since, have been tucked with quick checks, hands warm, feet found, and the blanket edge smooth around toes that like to wander. A penny-dipped candle stub, set in a shallow dish, receives a short, safe light while a little cough is counted and eased. The stub is pinched clean. Darkness resumes like a familiar shawl, not heavy, just correct. The bed itself is an arrangement of agreements. Straw and the tick gives the right firmness. The rope under it has been tightened with a key turned in the loops until the sleeping surface decides to be even. Over straw, a flannel blanket over flannel, a coverlet stitched with squares that remember hands. She slides a warming brick, wrapped in flannel, to the cold place near her feet and then removes it, leaving warmth to consider staying. A sprig of sweet gale in the peg above the pillow suggests to moth and to thought that calm is the house rule. A gentle aside, these layers are not luxury, they are a method. Comfort here is made, not purchased. Before lying down, she opens the chest once more, not to take anything, only to look. The top shelf shows its afternoon order. Shirts aligned, napkins squared, the tablecloth rolled to preserve its fall. Linen rests better after being seen. The lid closes with the softest breath of wood on wood. On the dresser, the blue bags for next week's washing sit dry. They prefer to sleep dry. The lane outside becomes a longer sound. A cartwheel asks one question and answers it. A dog edits the dark and leaves the sentence shorter. The thatch, holding late heat, gives it back to the rafters in small size. In the space between these noises hums the constant of the sea far off, but always present in a place that measures weather first and clocks later. In bed, warmth organizes itself around knees and shoulders. The breath takes 3 small steps, then a 4th larger one, and decides to keep that pattern. The day replays itself in very small pieces, starch turning clear, a cuff-obedient underiron, the blue bag's quiet swirl, each fragment losing its edges and becoming only a feeling of doneness. If sleep hesitates, she counts something softer than sheep. The number of pegs returned to the pouch, the pans placed lip down, the stitches set straight in a hem. Counting gentles the mind's feet until they are ready to sit. A gentle aside, Counting is not about totals, it is about rhythm. Repetition hands the mind a smooth stone and says, "Hold this. The night is not all silence." Once, the child coughs. The spoon finds the mug and the mug finds the child without the need of lamp. A small swallow, a cool hand over a small chest. The soft word that means hush without meaning stop. A minute of listening confirms the remedy's company, and the house exhale continues. Later, a breeze from the western gap in the thatch chooses the half-door during its wandering. It is checked by the bar and turned into a modest draught that makes the embers think of the sea again. The ash blanket holds. A piece of turf shifts with a tick and returns to being a red thought. On the floor, the sand laid earlier has gathered any dust that changed its mind about staying in the morning. Broom and pan will escort it out. Dreams are practical here. They do not concern kings or cities. They walk the bleaching green with the sheets, sea blue and water, and hear the iron's soft click become a field gate's latch. They remember the smell of barley water cooling and of rosemary pressed between linen layers. If a stranger enters a dream, he is given tea and directed to the lane, road, and rest have their own logic. Toward morning, the red at the hearth settles deeper, but not to nothing. Under the ash, several small lives of coal hold on like seeds under soil that has remembered winter. The room gathers a thin gray, the kind of light that keeps its voice low. The half-door's top is unlatched by a narrow brightness at the edges. Birds draw neat punctuation marks on the air. A cow somewhere turns hay into sound. Waking is an unrolling more than a start. A hand finds the quilt edge and slides it back. Feet find the rug woven from rags that had other jobs. The warming brick, cooled, is put on the hearth's lip to become a day stone. A pinch of ash is moved aside with the spoon's back. The quill at the shelf goes to the mouth and brings a breath to an ember, 2 breaths, 3. Red brightens, as if the coals remembered being day. Straw twists and a small turf agree to be morning. A gentle aside, the house's first act of the day is also its last of the night. The ember is a bridge. Before the kettle returns to the inner hook, she steps to the doorstone. The bar lifts, the lower half swings, the upper follows. Cool comes in the way a friend comes in already known. The lane shows its wet stones, the ditch shows its patient grass, the sky offers a cautious blue as if it, too, were waking. She lifts the bucket by its bail, goes to the pump, and returns with water that still tastes of iron and earth. Cups, bowls, and day itself will need it. Inside, small repairs become possible again. The broom gathers last night's sand, and the dust that chose it. The doorstone receives a touch of ash paste, not to make it bright but to keep it ready. The dresser gets one firm wipe along its lip. The chest remains closed. It is the linen's morning, too. On the table, a clean cloth falls the way the tablecloth practiced yesterday, like calm water meeting ashore. Tea leaves meet the warm pot. Porridge asks for its share of attention, and receives it. The mug with onion and honey is carried to the window light. It has given most of what it can. The rest is saved in a small jar for a day or two. The spoon is washed, dried, and put where a hand will find it at dusk. The house, thanked, begins again.